Chapter 288. Ning Xuemo's ankle was still burning with pain. Kirin probably saw that something was wrong with her and hurriedly ran over to let her lean on him. Ning Xuemo flipped onto Kirin's back and glanced at Ji Yunhuang. "You believe what she said?" Ji Yunhuang stiffened and looked at Ning Xuemo with a complicated gaze. "Yun Yarrow has never lied in front of me." Ning Xuemo smiled and tilted her head to look at the two people who were hugging each other. "Since it's like this, why are you still asking me?" "Brother, she thinks that she has a bargaining chip after subduing Kirin, so she doesn't put anyone in her eyes. Just now, she said something about you and me. It's very unpleasant to hear. I'm fine with it since I'm just a princess." "Brother, you are the crown prince of Chang Kong Empire. Your reputation can't be tarnished. You treated her so well, but she actually repaid your kindness with enmity. She's too much." Ji Yunyaro raised her tear-stained face and continued to complain. In front of so many people, Ji Yunhuang's handsome face became even more serious. He looked at Ning Xuemo with a cold gaze. "Ning Xuemo, apologize." He had seen Ning Xuemo's cunning and scheming. She had the temperament of a little fox. She dared to provoke and beat up anyone. She dared to tarnish anyone's reputation. Originally, he was attracted by her temperament, but now, he felt that she had gone overboard. It seemed that he had indulged her too much. Ning Xuemo slightly raised her head and looked at Ji Yunhuang for a few seconds. The corner of her lips curled up. "What if I say no?" She had to apologize to this princess. Not a chance. Although her charming face was smiling, her gaze was cold. Ji Yunhuang took a deep breath. I won't apologize to her," Ning Xuemo said word by word. Her voice was cold and crisp. "I only regret that I showed her mercy just now. With her original temperament, how could she allow someone like Ji Yunyaro to live? She actually dared to refute him, and he even said such words." Ji Yunhuang looked at his blood-soaked sister in his arms, then looked at Ning Xuemo's proud little face. He slowly clenched his fists. "Ning Xuemo, this prince will say one more thing. Apologize. Apologize to Yunyaro. Otherwise, this prince. If not, what are you going to do? Don't tell me you're going to hit me for her." Ning Xuemo's heart was burning with anger. She had long heard that Ji Yunhuang doted on his younger sister very much. Every time she got into trouble, as long as he was there, he would stand up for her regardless of who was in the wrong. She was skeptical at first, but now it seemed that it was true. Ji Yunhuang never thought that this little girl would dare to challenge his bottom line in front of so many people. He looked gentle and refined, but he was actually proud and arrogant. Ji Yunyaro took the opportunity to add fuel to the fire, causing Ji Yunhuang's anger to soar even higher. This little girl was too undisciplined and out of control. Did she really think that he wouldn't do anything to her? In his anger, he raised his hand. "Ning Xuemo, you really disappoint me." A blue light shot out from his palm and transformed into a large hand in midair. It slapped towards Ning Xuemo. Bang! That hand slapped Ning Xuemo's ribs. Ning Xuemo's face paled. Her body swayed on the Chilean's back. A mouthful of blood rushed up to her throat, but she forced herself to swallow it down. A line of blood flowed down from the corner of her mouth. Ji Yunhuang never thought that this palm would actually hit him. He was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but take a step forward. Xuemo. With her inner strength and qinggong, she should be able to dodge this palm. Chapter 289. Master. Kirin anxiously shouted. On the way here, Ning Xuemo had told it about her friendship with the crown prince. It thought that he was Ning Xuemo's friend and would not harm Ning Xuemo, so it was not prepared and did not have time to set up a protective barrier. Now that it saw that Ning Xuemo was injured, it was furious. It seemed that this friend was not trustworthy. What a biased person. It opened its mouth and spat out a ball of water, which instantly turned into an ice ball in the air and smashed towards Ji Yunhuang's face. "Master treated you as a friend, but you hurt her." The ice ball was as big as a basketball and brought with it a frightening sound. Even Ji Yunhuang did not dare to face it head-on and could only swing his sword and knock it against the ice ball. His original intention was to deflect the ice ball away, But he did not expect that the ice ball would explode in an instant and turn into countless small ice balls, which smashed onto his body. Of course, it also smashed onto Ji Yunyao, who was in his embrace. The power of these ice balls was not small, causing Ji Yunyao, who was watching Ning Xuemo, to let out a groan. Ji Yunhuang's cultivation was profound, so these ice balls only caused him some pain and did not cause any other harm. Hearing Ji Yunyao's discomfort, he subconsciously asked, "Yunyao, how are you?" Ji Yunyao's eyes were brimming with tears. "Brother, my body hurts. When we go back, let the imperial physician take a look at you." Okay. Brother, I will listen to you. Ji Yunyao was always very obedient in front of Ji Yunhuang. Actually, Ji Yunhuang had already secretly checked her body and found out that her injuries were all superficial and nothing serious. Thus, he was able to relax. In the end, he was still worried about Ning Xuemo and hurriedly raised his head to look at her. Ning Xuemo's face was as white as a sheet of paper. It was obvious that she had suffered internal injuries. She pacified the little Cheline, who still wanted to throw another ice ball. She shot a glance at Ji Yunhuang and faintly said, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, you once saved my life. Now that I've received your palm, we're even. I do not owe you anything anymore. You better control your little sister well. The next time she insults me, I will not be merciful to her. Little apple, let's go." Karine immediately snorted coolly and turned around to leave. Ji Yunhuang's heart suddenly sank, as if he had completely lost something. He panicked and hurriedly said, "Xuemo, wait." He subconsciously wanted to chase after her, but Ji Yunyao called out softly, "Brother, I feel terrible." While Ji Yunhuang was in a daze, Karine had already carried Ning Xuemo far away. Everyone knew that it was useless to stop her at this time. They looked at each other and dispersed. As for how to recruit this little girl, each of them had their own ideas. "Big brother, let's go too. Don't pay any more attention to that slut who doesn't know what's good for her." It was rare for Ji Yunyao to be able to lie in her brother's arms. She simply didn't want to get up. She subconsciously hugged his neck like a little bird. Ji Yunhuang's body stiffened and he lowered his eyes to look at her. "Yunyao, I've always doted on you and you've always been sensible in front of me. Don't lie to me." Ji Yunyao's heart jumped. Yunyao definitely won't lie to big brother. Very good, remember what you said. Ji Yunhuang raised his hand to summon Ji Yunyao's red-crowned crane and placed her on it. "Go back to the city first." Ji Yunyao panicked and hurriedly hugged his neck. "Big brother, I'm injured. I want you to take me with you. Big brother still has things to do. Be good, the injuries on your body are only superficial. Let the imperial physician treat it for you and you'll be fine. Go back first." He wanted to pull her hands away. Chapter 290. Ji Yunyao was so angry that she hugged him even tighter. "Brother, you went to look for that slut again? She already treated you like that." "Shut up." Ji Yunhuang's face darkened. "You're not allowed to talk about her like that. In the future, she will be your royal sister-in-law." It was earth-shattering. Ji Yunyao's face changed greatly. She couldn't help but shout in anger, "Royal sister-in-law? Brother, you're crazy. How is she worthy? She's a trash of psychokinesis and even has an affair with a man. With such a bad reputation, even if she warms your bed, she's still not worthy." "Shut up." Ji Yunhuang's face darkened and a storm was brewing. "Ji Yunyao, have you always thought of her like that? Then just now." It was rare for him to speak so harshly to Ji Yunyao. Ji Yunyao became even angrier. Blood rushed to her head and she became dizzy. She shouted, "She's already worse than a slut. Didn't you see her body just now? She was clearly wearing men's clothes and her legs were bare, just like a seductive slut, Pa." Ji Yunyao's face received a heavy slap. "Ji Yunyao, no wonder she treated you like that just now. You're a princess, how can you speak so viciously?" Ji Yunhuang was so angry that his hands were trembling. He never knew that his sister was so unreasonable. Did he really wrongly accuse Xuemo just now? Although that girl had always been as cunning as a little fox, she still had a bottom line. If you didn't really provoke her, she would still be kind to others and even have a code of brotherhood. She was ruthless to Ji Yunyao, so she must have provoked her too much. Thinking about Ning Xuemo's cold gaze and resolute words when she left, his heart suddenly ached. Was he wrong? This was not the result he wanted. He clearly came to look for her. Ji Yunyao caressed her face in disbelief. Her eyes were wide open. You hit me? Brother, you actually hit me because of that slut. Ji Yunhuang tore off his clothes that she had been holding onto and took a step back. He coldly said, Yunyao, you're not allowed to interfere in my matters. Also, even though we're siblings, there's still a difference between men and women. In the future, don't go to the Crown Prince's residence. If there's nothing important, don't see me. He turned around and jumped onto the large eagle that he had ridden here, leaving like a whirlwind. He was going to look for Ning Xuemo and tell her that he had been very worried ever since he found out about her disappearance. He had been searching for her day and night. Ji Yunyao was simply dumbfounded. She clutched the red-crowned crane's feathers tightly. The hatred in her eyes surged like a tidal wave. Ning Xuemo. Ning Xuemo. Sooner or later, I'll make you wish you were dead. The eagle that Ji Yunhuang was riding was naturally very fast. He thought that with his speed, he would be able to catch up with Ning Xuemo in less than a quarter of an hour and explain everything to her. However, he didn't expect that even after chasing in that direction for an hour, he still didn't see Ning Xuemo. Kirin shouldn't be that fast, right? The eagle's eyes were sharp, and the large eagle he was riding on was one of the best. As it flew in the air, even a rabbit running across the ground within a radius of tens of miles would not be able to escape its eyes. In order to find Ning Xuemo, he purposely let the large eagle fly lower and lower, almost brushing against the treetops. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have missed Ning Xuemo and Kirin. Unless she didn't take this path down the mountain. However, there was only one path up the mountain. If she didn't take this path, where else would she go? Chapter 291. Ning Xuemo's figure flashed through his mind. Naturally, he also thought of the Kirin. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. Suddenly, he hit his own head hard. Damn it. He had actually overlooked the most important issue. He had accompanied the ancestor in the palace for 4 whole days. He had not taken a single step out of the frozen palace. Every day, other than occasionally answering the ancestor's questions, he would just sit there and meditate. Naturally, he was also worried about Ning Xuemo who had left earlier. However, following the ancestor was a rule. If the ancestor did not leave, he would not be able to leave. The ancestor was also strange. Every day, other than occasionally talking to him, he would also spend most of his time meditating. He sat there like an ice sculpture. He did not see anyone else, nor did he go out to meet the emperor and civil and military officials who were paying their respects every day. He really did not know why the ancestor had stayed here for these few days. Don't try to guess the ancestor's intentions because even a deity would not be able to guess it. Therefore, although Ji Yunhuang was a little puzzled, he was too lazy to try to figure out the ancestor's intentions. The ancestor had said that he would stay in the palace for 3 days, but for some reason, he stayed for an extra day, causing Ji Yunhuang to accompany him for an extra day. Fortunately, accompanying the ancestor was very beneficial. For example, he would give Ji Yunhuang a date to eat every day. That date was obviously not an ordinary one. It could greatly replenish the vitality in the body. Not only would he not be hungry, but it would also increase his resistance to the cold. Although he had been staying in the frozen palace, he would not feel cold. His psychokinesis had also increased. These 4 days by the ancestor's side was equivalent to half a year of his own cultivation. 4 days later, the ancestor finally left. It was only after Ji Yunhuang left the palace that he found out that Ning Xuemo had been betrothed by the emperor and that she had been kidnapped. He was very strict with his subordinates. There were all kinds of talents in the Crown Prince's residence. During these 4 days, the aides in the Crown Prince's residence knew that he had a special impression of Ning Xuemo. Therefore, they had already started investigating this matter. Therefore, not long after Ji Yunhuang left, he found out that Ning Xuemo was not kidnapped. She was just trying to escape from the marriage. When he found out about all this, he was both happy and surprised. He was shocked that this girl was so bold that she dared to run away from the emperor's wedding. What made him happy was that she could even refuse the emperor's great favor of making her a concubine. It could be seen that she was not the kind of woman who chased after fame and fortune. He had not misjudged her at the beginning. Moreover, the little girl was smart enough to come up with such a plan that even his imperial father was unable to do anything about it. When he entered the palace and saw his father's sullen face, he was secretly pleased, of course. His men had also investigated and found out that after Ning Xuemore had escaped from the city, she had entered the Heavenly Book Mountain with number 2 by her side. What worried him the most was that the Crown Prince's residence had once sent experts into Heavenly Book Mountain to secretly protect that girl. However, they had not expected that after searching the entire 3 peaks, they would not be able to find them. It had been 4 days, and the girl seemed to have disappeared into thin air. No one had seen her again. Some people even suspected that she had met with misfortune in the mountains. Ji Yunhuang's heart was also burning with anxiety. He sent out all the elites from the Crown Prince's residence to search the mountains. He himself had also carefully searched the peaks one by one. However, he did not expect that when he searched the 3rd peak, the giant eagle he was riding on had sensed Ji Yunyao's existence and screamed. Chapter 292. He thought that she had encountered some ferocious beast, so he hurried over, but what he saw was Ning Xuemore attacking Ji Yunyao. When he saw that Ning Xuemore was fine, his joy was diluted by shock and anger. Protecting this sister of his had already become a habit in his bones. Perhaps he saw Ning Xuemore as his future wife, so he unconsciously raised his expectations of her. Seeing her like this, he actually felt disappointed and angry, so he wanted her to be more sensible. But he didn't expect that one slap from him would break the friendship that he had built with great difficulty. When she coldly called him Crown Prince, his usually calm heart actually felt as if a cat was scratching it. It was as if something was completely destroyed by his slap, and could never be found again. At that time, the situation was too chaotic, plus Ji Yunyao was crying and throwing a tantrum in his arms, which made his heart uneasy. He actually didn't think of why so many people were surrounding Ning Xuemore. Now that he suddenly thought of that little Chiline, it was as if he was suddenly enlightened and came to a realization. The Kirin beast, one of the 5 mythical beasts, had never appeared in Tianxi continent for thousands of years. It was rumored that the one who had the Kirin would win the world. No matter if it was the big sects or the monarchs of the various countries, once they knew of the existence of the Kirin beast, they would definitely think of ways to snatch it. And Ning Xuemore didn't know what kind of freak combination of factors, but she actually obtained the Kirin beast. As the saying goes, an ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Those people who surrounded Ning Xuemore were definitely after the Kirin beast. Although Ning Xuemore's medical skills were high, her psychokinesis was not that good. If she wanted to escape, she would definitely use a trick. Although he didn't know what kind of trick Ning Xuemore used, he knew that at this time, she definitely couldn't reveal her identity. Yet at this time, his younger sister exposed her identity and even spoke rudely. It was obvious that she harbored evil intentions. It was no wonder that Ning Xuemore didn't give him any face and mercilessly killed Ji Yunyao. That's not right, he checked Ji Yunyao's injuries. Although she looked to be in a sorry state, they were all superficial wounds and wouldn't be fatal. It seemed that Ning Xuemore had a sense of propriety when she made her move. She still cared about his reputation. She had taken care of his reputation, but he had seriously injured her in front of so many people. Recalling Ning Xuemore's pale face at that time, Ji Yunhuang felt like stabbing himself with a knife. He rode the eagle back and forth several times, but still couldn't find Ning Xuemore's whereabouts. Instead, he saw several groups of people who had besieged Ning Xuemore. He eavesdropped on the conversations of several groups of people. From their conversations, he roughly understood what had happened to Ning Xuemore at that time. The regret in his heart grew heavier. Of course, he had also heard the gossip about him and Ji Yunyao. While he was angry, he was also shocked. Although he and Ning Xuemore hadn't known each other for a long time, he still had some understanding of her temper. He knew that she wasn't the kind of person who liked to make up nonsense. She also wouldn't randomly make up this story just because Ji Yunyao had exposed her identity and insulted her. She must have really seen through something. Could it be that Yunyaro really harbored such unbearable feelings for him? Was Lasusu really harmed because of this? There were also other girls. It seemed that the girls who had confessed to him had all disappeared without a trace. He had never seen them again. He had never paid attention to the confessions and adoration of those girls, so even though he hadn't seen them again, he didn't take it to heart and didn't even think about it. Now that he thought about it, he broke out in cold sweat. Chapter 293. Were those other girls also secretly harmed like Lasusu? He took a deep breath. Now was not the time to think about these trivial matters. Finding Ning Xuemore was more important. She was a lonely girl who was heavily injured. She also had the coveted Chilean beast by her side. She was simply like a child carrying a big bag of jewelry on the street. Her situation was not ordinary. He had to find her as soon as possible and bring her under his protection. Ning Xuemore's figure appeared in his mind again. She was indeed wearing a man's robe. When he made his move, he also saw her exposed calf when the robe fluttered in the wind. His heart felt like it was blocked by a lump of iron, and he felt indescribably uncomfortable. What did she experience in the past 4 days? What about number 2? Who gave her the robe? Who made the blood contract between her and Kirin? Could it be the person who gave her the robe? Countless questions revolved in his mind. He naturally did not believe that the ancestor was behind this. The ancestor was in the palace these past few days. He personally accompanied him for a few days. Could it be that he was lying? It could not be that the ancestor could clone himself, right? This was absolutely impossible. Then, who could that person be? He forced himself to suppress the rolling questions in his mind. He raised his hand and sent out a signal to gather his subordinates. In a dense forest at the bottom of a hill, Kirin, with a head full of green grass, raised his head and looked at Ji Yunhuang's eagle flying past. He then turned his head to look at Ning Xuemore, who was also wearing a green grass robe and had a head full of green twigs. "Master, is he looking for you? Could it be that this bastard wants to beat you a few more times to avenge his shrew sister?" Ning Xuemore gently spat out the grass in her mouth and answered casually, "Don't worry about him. We will go our own way later." Kirin shook the camouflage on his body and sincerely admired it. Master was a smart master. She said that there would be people following her, so after escaping, she immediately made camouflage for herself and Kirin. She put the grass and twigs on her body and actually made it look like a bundle of grass. No matter where she squatted, she blended in with the surrounding grass. Several groups of people had already gone over, but no one had discovered her whereabouts. "Master, from whom did you learn this disguise technique?" Ning Xuemore faintly smiled but did not speak. This was the Special Forces jungle camouflage technique. It had been scientifically verified and was naturally very advanced. Those who were searching for her would not be able to find her, nor would they be able to find her. Apparently, those people did not expect her to be in disguise. They were too busy searching for her in white and the blue Kirin to notice the green grass. Ning Xuemore took another light breath. She had already taken a pill to treat her internal injuries, but the blood in her chest was still surging violently. It was obvious that her internal injuries were not light. She lowered her eyes. She had overestimated her own strength and underestimated the strength of Ji Yunhuang's palm. He probably didn't show any mercy when he attacked just now. This was good too. She had paid off all her debts to him. She let Kirin be her protector while she sat in the grass and meditated for a while. Initially, she wanted to use her internal energy to heal her injuries, but she suddenly remembered the breathing method that Juzan had taught her. Now that she had a little bit of psychokinesis in her body, perhaps she could try using this method to heal her injuries. She immediately put it into action, her psychokinesis circulating within her body. After a while, she only felt a warm itch around her injuries, and the pain gradually subsided. It really worked. Chapter 294. Ning Xuemore's spirit was shaken. She began to use her psychokinesis to soothe her injuries. After half an hour, she opened her eyes once again and sensed the condition of her injuries. The originally unbearable pain was unexpectedly gone. She was still worried. Turning around, She undid her robe and looked at her wounds. The bruises that had been swollen below her ribs were now only a faint red patch. She had actually recovered by 90%. Psychokinesis was indeed a magical thing. The Nine Supremes' method of cultivation was indeed superb. She leaped up from the ground. "All right, little apple, we can go down the mountain now. Your wounds have healed." Kareen blinked its large eyes at her. Her face was smeared with plant juice, so it was a sickly green. It was impossible to see how she looked now. Ning Xuemore turned around on the spot, the leaves and branches on her body rustling. "I'm done." She had been in so much pain earlier that she could barely stand up, but now she felt like she could do 2 rounds of punching on the spot. Although the little Cheline couldn't clearly see her complexion, it could tell that her spirit had improved a lot. It was very happy in its heart as it eagerly looked at Ning Xuemore. "Master, your meditation method just now was very strange, but the effect was really good. Can you teach me?" Of course. Kareen was now one with Ning Xuemore, so she was naturally willing to teach it. However, when she thought of the method of cultivation, her head hurt again. "Little apple, this cultivation method can only be practiced in human form." Kareen was speechless. It clenched its claws and thought of the 9 Supremes who had made a contract with them. That little bastard, why didn't he let it transform into human form? It stood up dejectedly. "Master, where are we going now?" "Back to the city." Ning Xuemore hopped onto its back. She was homesick after drifting outside for so long. In this world, if Ning Xuemore claimed to be the second best at evading pursuers, no one would dare to claim that they were the best. Coupled with Kareen's extraordinary speed, they managed to avoid the search teams from all directions and successfully descended the last peak of Heavenly Book Mountain. After climbing over a small hill, they would be able to see the official road that led to the capital. "Master, should I transform into another animal before following you into the city?" Kareen raised her head and asked. Ning Xuemore was looking at the mountain path, deep in thought. Hearing its words, she was shocked. "Didn't the 9 Supremes seal off your ability to transform?" "He sealed my ability to transform into a human. I can also transform into other animals." In order to prove its words, the little Cheline shook off the camouflage on its body, and with a shake of its body, it transformed. A faint blue light flashed, and the little Cheline disappeared. What appeared in its place was a majestic tiger, but its fur was blue. "Master, how is it?" Kareen spun in a circle on the spot, full of himself. Ning Xuemore was speechless. She raised her hand to rub her forehead and glared at Kareen. "Little bastard, why didn't you use this transformation earlier?" If she had known that it could transform like this, she would have turned it into a normal animal long ago. How could she have let so many people discover its existence and chase her like a rat crossing the street? You didn't tell me earlier." Kareen felt wronged. Looking at Ning Xuemore's dark face, it rubbed its big head against the corner of her clothes cutely. "Master, it's fine if I transform into this, right?" A blue tiger entering the city seemed to be quite eye-catching. Ning Xuemore looked at the blue tiger with its big watery eyes and asked tentatively, "How many transformations do you know?" Chapter 295. Apart from humans, I can transform into any living animal. "All right then, you can make a horse out of it first." The little Cheline frowned. "I feel that transforming into a horse will lower my style." "What style does a Kareen have?" Ning Xuemore immediately said, "Little apple, we have to enter the city quietly. You have to transform into a horse." "All right," the little Cheline compromised. With a shake of its body, it indeed transformed into a horse. However, the fur on its body was still blue. It was a blue horse. Why did it look like a freak? Ning Xuemore asked it to change its color again. This time, it was obviously difficult for Kareen. It shook its head and said that no matter what color it changed into, it would not change. After another round of haggling, the little Cheline finally turned into a blue cat with grievance. Ning Xuemore carried the blue cat down the mountain. At a hunter's house, she asked for a hunter's daughter's clothes and then went to the main road. After all, this place was remote and there should not be many people on the main road. When Ning Xuemore escaped and was brought here by the 6th king, There were very few people on the main road. However, this time, Ning Xuemo immediately felt that something was wrong when she walked on the main road. There were still not many people on the main road, but there were many people from various sects. These people were in a hurry and looked around with sharp eyes. It was obvious that they were looking for someone. Ning Xuemo's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that these people had not given up on her and still wanted to catch her. She carried the blue cat in her arms and walked freely on the streets. She was dressed like a hunter, and her small face was also dark. She looked like a typical mountain dweller. It was very normal for a mountain dweller to walk on this road, so the people from the sects that she passed by did not pay attention to her. She was relieved. If she was caught now, no matter which sect she fell into, she might not be able to get any benefits. They just wanted to use her as a breeder for the Kirin beast. And it was a long-term job. Once her 10-year blood contract with Kirin expired, it was hard to predict what would happen to her. These sects were still rather fearful of the imperial family. She would only be safer if she entered the city. She would first return to the Marquis's mansion to recuperate for a while. She would look at the situation before making any other plans. She carried Kirin and walked forward, her footsteps as vigorous as those of a normal hunter's daughter. It was very different from her usual walking style. Naturally, he would not reveal his identity. But for some reason, even though she didn't see anyone paying attention to her, she had a vague feeling that someone was following her. However, no matter how quietly she searched, she couldn't find anyone suspicious. This was the first time that Ning Xuemo had encountered such a situation. She tried to sense it again. This time, the feeling of being followed was gone. Was he being paranoid? Or was there something wrong with his intuition? Ning Xuemo shook her head inwardly and continued to walk forward. She quickened her pace. As her figure gradually disappeared at the end of the road, a man in red appeared among the dense leaves of a big tree beside the road. It was the Avildor in red who had been released from the crystal coffin by Ning Xuemo. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Ning Xuemo's back. He raised his hand and touched his chin. The little girl was very alert. She could actually sense that he was following her. Interesting. His tracking skill was the best in the 3 realms. No one had ever found out about it. He didn't expect that the little girl could sense it today. Chapter 296. Although his power had regressed, he was still surprised that a little human being could sense his aura. This little girl was always out of his expectations. It would be good if he could kidnap this little girl and make her his servant. Big monster. Senior, it's that red-clothed big monster. A young man on the road suddenly shouted while pointing at the tree. The young man who was traveling with him raised his head and saw the red-clothed man's bright smile on the tree. His expression changed, and he pulled at his junior brother who had recklessly shouted, "Let's go quickly." The two of them got up and were about to run for their lives. Just as they got up, a golden light suddenly flashed in front of their eyes. The two of them screamed at the same time and covered their eyes. Blood flowed out from the gaps between their fingers. "You guys are really annoying." A voice as gentle as the spring breeze rang in their ears, "Cripple a pair of eyes." The voice was gentle, but the move was not gentle at all. It was extremely sinister. The two of them rolled on the ground with golden needles in their eyes. They were in so much pain that they did not notice when the red-clothed man left. Ning Xuemo smoothly entered the city. When she entered the city again and saw the bustling crowd on the street, she felt like she had been reborn. It felt good to be able to return to the crowd. She could finally go back and have a good night's sleep. She strolled back to the vicinity of her Marquis Jingyuan's residence and keenly discovered that there were many secret agents moving around. She frowned slightly. Ji Yunyao, that little shrew. She revealed her identity in front of so many people on Tianshu Mountain. These people could not find her in the mountain, so they came to the vicinity of her residence to try their luck. It seemed that her troubles would not be solved in a short time. This time, it was a little tricky. She was tired and hungry, so she decided to return to her residence and rest for a few days. Of course, for safety, she could not reveal her identity. She and old Zhong had a special way of contacting each other, so she quickly called him over. After old Zhong saw the little master, he cried bitterly. Then, he secretly brought Ning Xuemo, who had disguised herself, back to the Marquis Jingyuan's residence. However, the people outside were still unaware. Ning Xuemore rested in the mansion for 2 full days before she was able to completely recover her strength. From old Zhong's mouth, she knew that the people outside had already turned the sky upside down in search of her. Vast Sky Empire's capital had many experts from various sects. These people were not the only ones who were looking for her. Even the officials knew that she had obtained the Kirin and sent many elites to the Tianshu Mountains to search for her. Right now, she had become the target of all the sects, clans, and powers. Although their motives were not pure, she did not have absolute strength. No matter which side she fell into, she would not have a good ending. The tree may want to be quiet, but the wind will not stop. Now that things had developed to this point, it really gave her a headache. Perhaps she should change her name and live somewhere else. Ning Xuemore began to consider this possibility. On a summer night, the air was still a little hot. In the quiet room, Ning Xuemore had finished cultivating once again. She was drenched in sweat and greasy. It was strange. She bathed every day, but ever since she cultivated her psychokinesis according to the method taught by Ju Zun, there would always be some light gray sticky stuff on her body. It looked like mud and grease, seeping out from all the pores on her body. It made her feel disgusted when she saw it. She opened her eyes and suddenly froze. Chapter 297. On the praying mat opposite her, there was a person sitting leisurely. His red clothes were like fire, and he was as gentle as a poem. He supported his chin with one hand, and the other hand was holding the praying mat. When he saw her open her eyes, his light red lips hooked up. He smiled like a gentleman, but the words he said were not gentlemanly at all. "Little girl, are you practicing the smelly toad skill? So smelly. So dirty." The red-clothed Evildor. All the muscles in Ning Xuemore's body tensed up. He actually found her here. Speaking of which, this big devil had just escaped. Why didn't he go out to enjoy the beautiful world? Why did he come to find her? To take revenge on her? You and I are even, aren't we? What brings your excellency here? Ning Xuemore quietly took 2 steps back. She quietly took a small box from the table in the corner of the room, and then quietly stuffed it into her sleeve. Even? Little girl, you used me to escape, and threw 3 troubles to me. You made my hands stained with blood, so I'm a little unhappy. The red-clothed Evildor stood up and opened his 2 palms to look, as if he was a little regretful. Please, I'm your benefactor who saved you. So what if I used you a little? I saved you once, and you saved me once, so we're even. No one owes anyone anything. But I like to owe others, and I don't like others to owe me. So even is not possible. The red-clothed Evildor's sleeves fluttered as he approached her step by step. Ning Xuemore took another step back, trying to pull away from him. Then what do you want? You already swore that you will never do anything to hurt me. Oh, it seems like I did make such an oath. Little girl, your memory is not bad. But, I only swore that I will not personally take your life. I did not say that I will not do anything else. He looked at her and smiled. For example, bring in the people who want to get you. There are so many people outside looking for you. I didn't expect a little girl like you to be so popular. If they know that you are hiding in this mansion, TSK, what do you think will happen? Ning Xuemore's face slightly changed. What do you want? Be my servant. The red-clothed Evildor laid out his conditions, and even spoke in a tone as if he was bestowing a favor. There aren't many people in this world who are qualified. Little girl, you're lucky. Lucky my ass. Ning Xuemore really wanted to slap him back into the crystal coffin. Opening that crystal coffin was definitely the biggest mistake of her life. It was like opening Pandora's box, and if I don't want to. Oh, that's a pity. The red-robed Evildor spread out his hands, then disappeared. Ning Xuemore. She thought that he would be entangled with her for a while, maybe even have a fierce battle, but she didn't expect him to give up so easily. How could this red-clothed Evildor be so easy to talk to? She didn't believe it. Ning Xuemore circled the quiet room like a whirlwind, searching for traces of the red-clothed Evildor. After a while, she finally gave up. That pervert had really left. She couldn't sense his aura at all. She paused for a moment in the quiet room, then walked out in large strides. Since that bastard found this place, he must know all about her. If he really attracted other people, then she would never have a day of peace. So she better take this opportunity to escape far away. The quiet room was built on top of a small lake in the back garden of the Marquis mansion. It was connected to the shore by 9 winding corridors. Chapter 298. This was because Ning Xuemore had already instructed that this back garden was a forbidden area. Without her permission, no one in the mansion dared to set foot here. It was very secluded. Her body was greasy and very uncomfortable. These 2 days, every time she finished practicing, she would take a bath in the lake to refresh herself before doing other things. Although the situation was urgent, she still had time to take a bath. She looked around and confirmed that there was no one around. Then, she took off her clothes and jumped into the lake. Of course, because she was afraid of the red-clothed Evildor, she did not dare to take off all her clothes. She was still wearing her own underwear. She put the other clothes on the stone platform in the middle of the lake. Then, she sank her body into the water and began to wash. The greasy mud looked dirty, but it was not difficult to wash. Almost half of it was soaked in the water. She had just washed 2 times when a shadow flashed in the distance. A blue cat flew over. "I also want to wash. Master, I also want to wash." Kirin. Wasn't it playing with the chastity-testing beast? While Ning Xuemore was in a daze, the little Cheline had already jumped into the lake with a splash. It rolled around in the water and revealed its original body. "Ayaya. I've been in my cat form for the past 2 days. The lake was not deep. It was less than 2 meters. Kirin was half floating in the water. Only its head was exposed. Its eyes were slightly closed and it looked very comfortable. Kirin was lively and naughty. It liked to run around in the mansion. There was not a moment of peace. In order not to disturb people, Ning Xuemore let it move around in its cat body. Only at night, when it was resting, it would return to its original body and rest in her room. When she was practicing, Kirin felt bored and ran out to play with the chastity-testing beast. Originally, it would play for less than an hour. This time, it ran out for less than a quarter of an hour. How come it came back? However, this was also good. She had to hurry up and take it away. It would save her time to find it. "Why are you back so early today? Did Tom bully you?" Ning Xuemore poured a handful of water on Kirin's head. "It doesn't dare. However, it's strange that it's not as afraid of me as other beasts. Its soul aura is also a little strange. Also, I can't understand its beast language." Kirin was puzzled. Ning Xuemore snickered. Kirin also spoke Chinese. It understood the animal language, but it might not understand English. Poor Tom. It wasn't easy for him to find a beast that could speak, but he still couldn't communicate with it. "By the way, Master, that fellow actually likes to read books." The words on the book were also quite strange. They looked like tadpoles, but it was reading them with great interest. When I went to play with it, it complained that I was noisy, but it didn't dare to chase me away. That sullen look. "It's practicing and studying." Ning Xuemore answered with a few words. He felt somewhat gratified. The books that the chastity-testing beast was reading were all translated by her to it. They were the basic cultivation methods, the same way as the chastity-testing beast. In order to get rid of its beast form as soon as possible, Tom studied very hard. It was to the point that it forgot to eat and sleep. It was just like a bookworm. Not to mention that Kirin went to find it. Even if she went back to the mansion to see it, it would only excitedly express its welcome and then sit in the corner to read the book. Ning Xuemore came back this time and brought some herbs that were suitable for it to practice. She also refined some pills to treat the symptoms. After Tom ate it, its cultivation speed became faster. In these 2 days, its cultivation speed was very fast. Tom was actually very smart. Ning Xuemore also taught it Chinese several times in her free time. Chapter 299. Since Tom had only learned to speak for a short time, it could not understand most of the words spoken by Kirin. Therefore, after the little Cheline happily communicated with it a few times, It straightforwardly gave it a nickname, Tom the Big Parrot. Although Tom's soul was that of a human, its body was that of a beast after all. As a beast, it had a natural fear of Kirine. Therefore, although it had a bad temper, it did not dare to be angry with Kirine. Besides, it did not understand the language, so Tom tried not to argue with Kirine and ignored it. Kirine was very bored, but she often played with Tom for fun. In the 2 days since it came to the mansion, Kirine spent most of its time with Tom. "Little Apple, how did you know that I was taking a bath here?" Ning Xuemore felt that something was wrong. "Just now, Mr. Zhong came into the Xiaoyaro pavilion and told me. He also said that you prepared a delicious base for me. Where is the base?" Kirine looked at her eagerly. Ning Xuemore's heart suddenly sank. Mr. Zhong did not know that she was taking a bath here, and he would not let Kirine come in at this time. Of course, he would not lie about the base. The image of the red-clothed Evildor flashed in her mind. Needless to say, it was that bastard who did this. Did that bastard disguise himself as Mr. Zhong to trick Kirine? Then what was his purpose in doing this? She suddenly jumped out of the water and reached out to grab her clothes. "You were fooled. Let's get out of here." Her fingertips hadn't even hooked onto her clothes when a faint golden light flashed above her head. A large net fell from the sky, covering Ning Xuemore and the little Cheline with lightning speed. Ning Xuemore reacted quickly. She immediately sank into the water and wanted to take the opportunity to swim away. However, the water in the lake was too shallow. As soon as she sank into the water, the pale golden net covered her and drilled into the water. After a while, the big net was pulled out of the water with a splash. Ning Xuemore and Kirine were trapped in the net like two big fish. "Got it. Got it. She really came back, and the little Cheline is also here." It was unknown when 2 men had appeared on the lakeside. They all looked to be in their 30s, and their clothes were extremely ordinary. However, their eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, and their actions had the dignity of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. They looked at Ning Xuemore and Kirine in the net, and their eyes flashed with surprise. One of them raised his sleeve, and the big net that trapped Ning Xuemore and Kirine flew towards him. Bang! Ning Xuemore and Kirine crashed into him along with the net. That person was knocked back a step. He was still a little puzzled. The strength of his net was not so strong. How could there be such a strong impact? He subconsciously pushed the net away and took another step back. Suddenly, he realized that there was something in his hand. He lowered his head to take a look. In his hand was a small brownish-red ball. "What is this? Chiline's inner core?" He raised his hand to his eyes and wanted to take a closer look. Suddenly, he heard his junior brother not far away shouting, "Senior brother, throw it away." Before he could finish his sentence, he heard a loud bang. It sounded like a firecracker had exploded. That person's hand shook, and a cloud of smoke spread out in front of him. Countless fine needles shot out from the smoke. The distance was too close, and that person had no time to dodge. He groaned and was shot by several fine needles. Those fine needles were obviously coated with poison. After being shot, that person's body swayed, and his face twisted. "It's itchy. It's so itchy." He reached out and scratched his body. After a few scratches, he suddenly screamed and fell to the ground. Chapter 300. The other person was shocked. He didn't care about Ning Xuemore and Kirine who were still trapped in the net. He jumped over and said, "Senior." He reached out his hand to help him. "It's itchy. It's itchy." In the blink of an eye, the person who was hit by the needle felt itchy all over his body. He had scratched his whole body. When he saw his junior coming over to help him, he couldn't help but scratch his junior again. "It's so itchy." He tried to stay awake and said, "Junior, quick, ask the girl for the antidote." The junior finally came back to his senses. He immediately looked at the big net and his body stiffened. The girl and Kirine who were trapped in the net had already escaped. Only the light golden net was left on the ground. How could it be? His senior brother's net was a mechanism magic tool. Not only was it incomparably tough, no sharp weapon could cut through it, but there was also a mechanism at the mouth of the net that could only be broken by his senior brother. Once he was caught in the net, he could forget about escaping by himself, But this girl actually cracked the mechanism in such a short time and escape. How did she do it? Kareen stood in the same place and looked at them angrily. All the scales on his body were standing up. The girl flew up and landed on the big rock in the middle of the lake. Her clothes were still on the big rock. She had to put on her clothes first. Just as her hand was about to touch her dress, a hand suddenly appeared out of thin air and snatched the dress away from her. Then, it disappeared. Ning Xuemore was a step too late and missed her dress by a hair's breadth. Pervert in red. Get your ass out here for big sister. Ning Xuemore was furious. Although she only caught a glimpse of that hand, there weren't many hands that were so delicate in this world. Moreover, she saw the bright red sleeves of that person. Among the people she knew who liked to wear such flashy red clothes and had such a perverted personality, there was no one else other than that Evildor in red. Little girl, take out the antidote. That junior marshal brother couldn't hold himself back any longer. He shouted at the young girl standing on the big rock. There was a faint red light in his palm that was about to be spat out. Ning Xuemore raised her head and glanced at that person. She crossed her arms and spoke without any trace of politeness. Trespassing into someone else's mansion, plotting against the owner of the mansion, and you still want the antidote? Are you still dreaming? That junior marshal brother was furious. Little girl, you've got guts. Do you know who we are? If you know what's good for you, hurry up and send the antidote over. Otherwise, I'll let you have a taste of the Li heart fire. Fire of the heart. Centrifugal force. Ning Xuemore sneered. Her gaze fell on the back of the junior brother's hand, and the corner of her lips curled up again. 1, 2, 3. The junior brother didn't understand why she suddenly started counting. Seeing that his senior brother was already delirious from the itch, he anxiously attacked. With a wave of his hand, 5 fireballs flew towards Ning Xuemore. He wanted to knock her unconscious and subdue her first. Unexpectedly, just as his 5 fireballs flew halfway, Kareen opened its mouth and spat out a water arrow, meeting the fireballs head-on. Water countered fire, and the fireballs vanished into thin air. That junior marshal brother was stunned. He had forgotten that this Kareen was a water Kareen. 8, 9, 10. Ning Xuemore crossed her arms in front of her chest and counted to 10. That junior marshal brother was impatient from her counting. Just as he wanted to change his move, he suddenly felt an unbearable itch on the back of his hand. Once that itch happened, it instantly spread throughout his entire body. In a split second, the itch almost reached his heart. It was so itchy that he wanted to scream. Chapter 301. It was so itchy that he wanted to scream out loud. He forced himself to stand upright and shouted out, "We are the protectors of the limitless sect. You can't hurt us." After shouting out this sentence, he couldn't stand anymore and fell to the ground. Just like his senior brother, he rolled his body on the stone ground. Ning Xuemore slowly walked over and looked down at the 2 people who were rolling on the ground. The protectors of the limitless sect, their position wasn't low. Moreover, the limitless sect wasn't considered a righteous sect. Their methods were more sinister, and they were a sect that would do anything to achieve their goals. Once someone offended this sect, they would be hunted down by the entire sect. Since Ning Xuemore planned to stay in this continent, she naturally understood the matters of the various sects. She didn't like to kill people, but sometimes she had to kill. She slowly walked towards the 2 people and her eyes turned cold. "You 2 can go on your way." With a flick of her finger, 2 poison needles shot out and pierced into the hearts of the 2 people. The 2 people finally stopped itching, but their eyes instantly widened as they stared at the little girl. Their mouths were gurgling as if they didn't believe that she would be so ruthless. "You 2 originally had bad intentions towards me, so it's natural for you to die in my hands." Ning Xuemore looked down at them coldly as they breathed their last breaths. Such a vicious girl. "But, I like it." Someone in the air clapped twice, as if he was cheering for her. A red figure appeared on top of a large stone. They seemed to be from some sect and they looked quite strong. "You killed the 2 of them, aren't you afraid of being hunted down by their sect?" "I'm not afraid," Ning Xuemore calmly replied. She had completely offended these 2 people. Once she gave them the antidote, they would definitely not let her go. She didn't know what kind of suffering they would give her. So, these two people must be killed. While they were talking, the bodies of the two people on the ground actually curled up again. There was juice bubbling on their bodies and the smell of burnt flesh came out. The two people's bodies were melting and disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The red-clothed man narrowed his eyes. Little girl, your ability to destroy corpses is not small. Aren't you going to ask who sent them? Ning Xuemore glanced at him. Do you even need to ask? Other than you, who else would tell them my whereabouts? You want to threaten me when they catch me? Threatening me to become your servant? In your dreams. The little girl was so smart. He actually guessed it correctly. The man in red looked at her with admiration. Little Xuemore, you are very smart. I suddenly feel that it's a waste of your talent to be a servant. Of course, it was a waste of talent. It was more appropriate for her to be his master. This bastard actually knew her name. It seemed like he had already investigated her behind her back. Ning Xuemore stretched out a hand and said, "Give me back my clothes." Her clothes were still in his arms. The red-clothed man smiled faintly, his eyes gleaming as he looked her up and down several times. Suddenly, he said in an incomparably serious manner, "Little Xuemore, I've discovered that you've actually grown taller again. Oh, your figure seems to be starting to look good as well. Also, your little outfit is very interesting. You're dressed like this, standing in front of a big man like me. Why don't you know how to be shy?" Ning Xuemore sneered, "Thank you for the compliment. I'm already good-looking, there's no need for you to say it. As the saying goes, don't look at indecent things. You stole my clothes like a thief and you still have the face to say that I'm dressed like this." Chapter 302. Ning Xuemore found it strange as well. Ever since she started cultivating the martial arts that Juzun had taught her, not only was she using greasy mud every time, she was also growing taller. Her originally flat body was also starting to develop. Every time she cultivated, it was like she had been reborn. In just 2 days, she had grown 5 to 6 centimeters taller, and her figure was starting to become curvaceous. In addition, she was only wearing her self-made underwear, which was equivalent to a modern bikini, revealing her fair arms and legs. It made her body look even more curvaceous, and she had the charm of a young girl. Ning Xuemore's original body had been malnourished for a long time, and her body had not developed well. She still looked like a 10-year-old child at the age of 13. Now, after a few days of cultivation, her figure was already that of a normal 13-year-old girl. Not only had she grown taller, her skin was also much fairer than before. She was originally a beauty in the making, and after developing, she finally became a beauty. When her eyes turned to the side, there was a natural charm to them. In addition, her appearance was sweet and pure, and her every frown and smile radiated brilliance, making it hard for people to shift their eyes away from her. Her feet were now bare. Her feet were white and soft, as if they were carved from jade. Her toenails were pink and glossy, shining like pearls under the starlight. The man in red looked at her feet, his gaze deeper. This girl's face might not be the prettiest, but her feet were beautiful. They were like crystals. He looked at her pair of tiny feet and actually felt something. The little Cheline had been paying attention to Ning Xuemore's expression. When it saw Ning Xuemore's expression, it immediately took a step forward and stood in front of Ning Xuemore, blocking most of her body. Naturally, it also covered her little feet. It angrily said, "You big pervert, what are you looking at?" The man in red's gaze turned to Ning Xuemore's face. "Shui Ilan." Ning Xuemore raised her eyebrows. "What? My name?" The man in red's eyes were as deep as water, and there was a smile at the corner of his lips. "Remember it." Ning Xuemore turned to leave. "I'm not interested in your name." She only hoped that he would go far away and not provoke her again. There was a flash of red in front of her eyes. Shui Ilan stood in front of her. "Wait." Ning Xuemore took a step back and looked at him warily. "What are you doing?" Shui Ilan opened her dress and handed it to her. "Come, put on your clothes. Although you look good like this, it's enough that I'm the only one who can see it. As for the others..." He glanced at Kirin with hostility. "If anyone else sees you like this, I'll gouge their eyes out." His last sentence was too sinister. The little Cheline quivered and shivered. It angrily glared at him. Who are you? Why should I only show it to you? She's my master, not yours. I've decided that I don't want her to be my servant. She can be my concubine. Concubine knows husband's name, and only husband can see concubine's body. Shwe Ilan made an earth-shattering announcement. Karine was speechless. Are you having a fever? Ning Xuemore was also shocked. She picked up her clothes and took a few steps back. Ignoring his crazy words, she quickly put them on. Shwe Ilan looked at her with a smile. If you don't object, then I'll take it as a yes. Yes, my ass. Ning Xuemore refuted him. I'm not interested in you. Even if you want to marry me as your wife, I won't agree, let alone being a concubine. The outside world is beautiful. It's not easy for you to come out. You should go out and walk around. Don't look for me again. She turned around and left. Chapter 303. She had just taken a few steps when her waist suddenly tightened. She didn't even have time to scream before her body was lifted up into the air. A voice chuckled beside her ear. The outside world is really not bad. Accompany me for a stroll. Ning Xuemore's expression changed. Her body was tightly held in Shwe Ilan's embrace, and she couldn't move for a moment. The wind whistled past her ears, and the scenery in front of her quickly flashed by. Karine shouted, "Let go of my master. Where are you taking her?" It wanted to chase after him. "Little colt, if you're not afraid of being caught, then chase after me." Shwe Ilan chuckled, and his laughter dissipated in the wind. Karine was startled. It immediately rolled on the ground and turned into a blue cat. When it jumped up again, the red-clothed Evildor had already disappeared without a trace with its little master. It pressed its little paws on the ground, trying to get rid of it. That won't be so easy. Its body shot up into the treetops like lightning, and it flew all the way, chasing after them. "Where are you taking me?" Ning Xuemore struggled in his embrace. This guy's qigong was actually so good. It was practically no different from flying. Wherever he went, it was like a flash of a shadow. There were obviously spies from various sects wandering around outside her residence, but not a single one of them discovered their whereabouts. "I'm taking you to see the outside world. What's the point of being cooped up in the residence all day?" Shwe Ilan didn't loosen his grip on her arm. "Hey, you're hurting me." Ning Xuemore struggled again. This scoundrel also wrapped her arms around his, making it hard for her to breathe. "Be good. Endure it for now." Shwe Ilan didn't have any intention of letting go, and flew even faster. "Red-clothed Evildor, you swore you wouldn't hurt me." Ning Xuemore was angry. "Ien, I didn't hurt you. Call me by my name. If you call me by my name, I might loosen up a little." Shwe Ilan laughed gently. Ning Xuemore secretly gritted her teeth. She took a deep breath and finally couldn't do anything to him. "Shwe Ilan. This should be fine, right? Loosen up a little. I'm about to throw up from your strangling." That's more like it. It's just that when you say my name, it's a little stiff. It's not very comfortable to listen to. "Why don't you call me?" He seemed to suddenly have an epiphany. "You can call me Lan Shan. In the waning night, my blood-red clothes are like fire." Ning Xuemore shuddered. "Lan Shan? Isn't this name a little feminine? There were even poems and allusions." "Not bad, that's good." Shwe Ilan was obviously very satisfied, and his arms loosened a little. Ning Xuemore secretly clenched her teeth. "This sister is going to beat you into a pulp." She smiled and looked at him. "You won't do anything bad to me, right? I'll take good care of you." Shwe Ilan lowered his head and kissed her forehead. "I think we're quite compatible. Match your head." Ning Xuemore smiled again. "Your Excellency must be joking. You've lived for at least a few thousand years, and I'm only 13 years old. It's said that 5 years is a generation gap. You and I are so different, and the generation gap between us is like the Mariana Trench. It's definitely insurmountable. I think it's better for your Excellency to find someone similar to you." While she was talking nonsense with him, one of her hands was secretly moving behind his back. She lowered her hand slightly, and a blue steel needle appeared at the tip of her finger. She was about to pierce one of his major acupoints on his back when her wrist suddenly tightened. Shui Ilan seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. A strand of black hair wrapped around Ning Xuemo's wrist like a snake and pulled it to the front. Chapter 304. TSK, little Xuemo, you're really hiding a dagger in your smile. This poison needle is the kind you used to make those two people disappear, right? TSK, I'm your future husband. People say that a woman's heart is the most poisonous. This saying is indeed true. Shui Ilan shook his head and sighed. At the same time, he raised his hand and took the poison needle from Ning Xuemo's hand. He pointed the tip of the needle at Ning Xuemo's fingertip. Xuemo, did you bring the antidote for this needle? What do you think will happen if I stab you with it? Ning Xuemo's expression changed slightly. She glared at him with hatred. Why don't you try it? If I die, you'll have fulfilled your oath. Then you'll be locked in that crystal coffin for 10,000 years. Shui Ilan sighed. I'm not afraid of fulfilling my oath. We're monsters, so we don't believe in gods. That oath can't bind me. He really doesn't believe in gods. Damn it, I was fooled by him back then. You believe in the demon ancestor? Ning Xuemo asked tentatively. What do you think? Shui Ilan blinked his eyes. If you don't want to say it, then forget it. Ning Xuemo closed her eyes. When you marry me, I'll tell you everything. Shui Ilan's tone was gentle. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead again. But you're too naughty. I have to teach you a little lesson. Before Ning Xuemo could understand what he meant, his arm suddenly loosened. Ning Xuemo couldn't help but fall downwards. A vast expanse of white water rushed towards her. At this moment, Ning Xuemo was able to recognize where this water body was. Netherworld Lake. It was the only big lake in Chang Kong Country's capital, Jialan City. There were countless man-eating aquatic beasts in the lake. The Netherworld Lake that made everyone shrink back in fear. At that time, the fake Hu Yidao was lured into this lake and eaten by the monsters. She didn't expect that this bastard Avildor who kept saying that he wanted to marry her would actually throw her in here. The monster at the bottom of the lake seemed to have smelled something. It popped its head out of the water and looked at Ning Xuemo, who was descending from the sky. It bared its sharp teeth. Ning Xuemo couldn't help but fall towards the mouth of a monster. Her expression changed. At this time, she could only save herself. Fortunately, she had refined a lot of poisonous needles recently. She waved her hand and shot a poisonous needle at the mouth. When the poison needle entered the monster's mouth, the monster quivered and closed its mouth. At the same time, Ning Xuemo's body landed next to the monster's mouth. Her hand was about to enter the monster's closed mouth. Ning Xuemo really couldn't dodge, so she could only close her eyes and wait for her arm to be cut off. Damn it, the small lesson he was talking about was to cripple her. This pervert. At this critical moment, her ankle suddenly tightened. Then, she was pulled by a strong force. She was lifted upside down and flew into the air again. Little Xuemo, how does it feel? Shui Ilan's laughter was like a cool breeze. It was indescribably pleasant. Ning Xuemo's little face was pale. Her whole body was trembling slightly. Suddenly, she cried out, You. What do you want? You can just kill me. Woo woo woo. Shui Ilan was stunned. He had never seen her cry before. He held her ankle and inevitably saw her exquisite snow-white feet. His throat moved slightly. How can I bear to kill you? You should stay by my side obediently in the future. As he spoke, he flipped her over. Ning Xuemo turned in the air and finally, her head was facing up. Shui Ilan reached out and wanted to hold her waist. Suddenly, a golden light flashed in front of him. A big net was coming toward him at lightning speed. Chapter 305. By the time he reacted, he had already been trapped in a pale golden net. Bastard, go and die. Ning Xuemo took the opportunity to step on his body and used the momentum to fly to the shore. Shui Ilan fell directly into the lake with the net wrapped around him. Ning Xuemo's feet landed on the shore and her heart calmed down. She pulled the light golden rope on the other end of the net and looked towards the lake. The place where the net fell was like a boiling pot. Countless beasts popped their heads out and then sank back down. Blood flowed out and dyed that small part of the lake red. Ning Xuemo's heart was beating fast. She looked at the body of water and smirked proudly. This bastard, he actually schemed against her. Now that he was the one being schemed against, he deserved it. Ning Xuemo was an expert in mechanisms. The net used by the two elders of the Limitless sect to plot against her in the Marquis's estate was a mechanism net. At that time, she had easily broken it. After killing those two people, she had also quietly put away the net. Now, it was just the right time to use it on this red-clothed pervert. This net was made of a very special material. It was not afraid of knives, axes, fire, or water. Unless the mechanism on the net was broken, the person trapped inside would not be able to escape. The moment Ning Xuemo used the net to trap Shuer Ilan, the mechanism on the net was completely locked. Unless she pulled the net onto the shore or loosened the rope in her hand, there would be a chance to break the mechanism. Now, that fellow could only be trapped in the net. The holes in the net were very fine. Even if Shuer Ilan knew the bone shrinking technique, he would not be able to squeeze out. Many of the beasts in the lake had long and sharp mouths. They could reach into the holes in the net to peck at him. Shuer Ilan, this time I will make you a bloody tattered person. She stood on the shore and watched as the boiling water gradually calmed down. A few beast corpses floated on the surface of the lake. The corpses were dark purple. It was obvious that they were poisoned. Ning Xuemo let out a sigh of relief. After a while, she slowly pulled the net back. She pulled it back very carefully. Shuer Ilan was too cunning. She had to be careful. She could feel that the net was much lighter. It must be that the pervert's flesh and blood had been eaten, leaving only his bones in the net. Master. A little blue cat flew over like lightning and plunged into her arms. It looked at her with a pair of bright eyes. Master, are you okay? Where is that bastard? Ning Xuemo used one hand to reel in the net while the other hand rubbed the little blue cat's head. He's in the net and fell into the water. The little blue cat was naturally Kirin. It had experienced the power of the net and knew that it could not be opened with brute force. It was slightly relieved. It looked into the water and suddenly sniffed. There is a beast in the water. That's right. It's also a very savage monster. When it sees flesh and blood, it swallows them whole. Not even the bones are left behind. While speaking, Ning Xuemo had already pulled the net to the shore. When she lowered her head to look, she was stunned. There was nothing in the light golden net. There were only a few pieces of dark red bloodstains. There was not even a bone left. It couldn't be, right? That person was a big monster. How could he die like that? Even his bones were dragged out and swallowed by the beast. Although this net could only be entered and not exited, and she added poison to the net for insurance. The poison she applied was enough to kill a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Chapter 306. Although this net could only be entered and not exited, she had added something to the net just to be safe. The poison she applied was enough to kill a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but seeing him disappear without a trace, Ning Xuemo still felt that it was too easy. It was unreal. However, looking at the floating corpses of the beasts, she felt that she had succeeded. The poison she applied was very strange. Once a person was poisoned to death, if the beasts ate his corpse, they would also die from the poison. However, these beasts' corpses would not die from the poison. It seemed that these beasts had eaten his corpse. Otherwise, he would not have died. Kirin circled around the net and sniffed the bloodstains. She was a little puzzled. This blood has a fishy smell. It smells like the beasts in the lake. It doesn't smell like that person's. Ning Xuemo's heart sank. Could it be that person did not die? That's impossible, right? If he had successfully escaped, wouldn't he have immediately appeared to take revenge on her? How could he have escaped so quietly? She looked at the net in her hand. Her eyelashes drooped slightly. With a shake of her hand, she threw the net back into the lake. With a splash, the Limitless sect's treasure sank to the bottom of the lake and could no longer be seen. She clapped her hands and picked up the little blue cat. Little apple, let's go. Just as she turned around, her feet paused. Not far behind her stood a man dressed in white. His figure was tall and straight like a jade tree. His appearance was incomparably handsome, but his expression was a little haggard. At this moment, his eyes were focused on Ning Xuemore. Ning Xuemore's lips curled up slightly. She raised her sleeves and saluted. Her tone was indifferent and distant. "Your Highness." That person was Ji Yunhuang. Ning Xuemore's politeness clearly made him uncomfortable. He paused and took a step forward. "Xuemore, it's good that you're fine. I'll look for you in the next 2 days." Ning Xuemore cupped his hands again. "Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. I'm fine. If there's nothing else, I'll..." Before she could say goodbye, Ji Yunhuang interrupted her. "I have something to discuss with you. Why don't we find a place to sit?" "What's the matter?" Ning Xuemore didn't want to move. A trace of pain flashed through Ji Yunhuang's eyes, but he still smiled faintly. "It's a very important matter, so it won't take up too much of your time. Don't tell me you won't even give me this much face." After all, Ning Xuemore was still living in this country. She didn't want to offend him too much. She smiled faintly. "Your Highness is too polite. Your Highness, please." His attitude was polite and distant. Ji Yunhuang's fingers tightened as he forced a smile. "All right, let's go." After Ning Xuemore and Ji Yunhuang left, the Netherworld Lake returned to its usual tranquility. There were many ferocious beasts in this place. Usually, very few people would come here. That was why when Ning Xuemore and Shui Ilan created such a big commotion here, no one came to watch. The grass on the shore was luxuriant, and the lake rippled gently. After a moment, the center of the lake suddenly surged up like a fountain. On top of the water, a person slowly rose. He was wearing red clothes and had black hair. He looked gentle and elegant like jade. It was Shui Ilan, who Ning Xuemore thought had been eaten by the monsters. He floated in the center of the lake. The nearby aquatic monsters surrounded him from afar. Each and every one of them arched their bodies as if they were worshipping him. Shui Ilan looked at Ning Xuemore and Ji Yunhuang walking side by side. His dark eyes slightly narrowed. What a ruthless and straightforward little girl. Chapter 307. What a ruthless and straightforward young lady. She was as cunning as a little loach. When he was not paying attention, he was plotted against by her again. However, he liked it. Only a young lady like her was worthy of him. Only a young lady like her was worthy of staying by his side. The image of her delicate little feet flashed across his mind, and he swallowed slightly. Perhaps it was unfair for her to stay by his side as a concubine. When he caught her again, he would tell her that he could raise her status to become a concubine. The place that Ji Yunhuang chose to sit was a tea house. Ning Xuemore had visited this tea house a few days ago. She had even met the 6th prince, Ji Yunhao, and Hu Daichang. Because of a teapot, they had gotten into an argument. Ning Xuemore plotted against Hu Daichang and received 3 lashes from Ji Yunhao. In the end, she was rescued by the crown prince, Ji Yunhuang. Although it had happened more than 20 days ago, Ning Xuemore felt like it was a lifetime ago when she revisited this place. Too many things had happened in the past 20 days. No matter if it was people or her mood, they had all changed. Hu Daichang was dead, and the 6th prince was demoted. As for her, she did not know how many times she had been on the brink of death, but she was still strong enough to live in this world. However, her situation was still not good. The old emperor's engagement had not been annulled. Because of the Kirin incident, many sects and forces were secretly eyeing her covetously. Ning Xuemore noticed that the most famous and elegant tea house in the city was cleaner and quieter than the last time she had been here. Originally, the upper and lower floors of this tea house were very clean, but this time, it was especially clean. It was as if everything had been wiped with alcohol. If she used a magnifying glass to look at it, she was afraid that she would not be able to find a single speck of dust. Even the waiter of the tea house was wearing new clothes. His face was clean, and his walking speed was light and fast. There were many people drinking tea downstairs, but all of them were holding their breaths and sitting upright. Everyone's face was filled with excitement, but they forcefully suppressed it and pretended to be calm. Even if they were talking, their voices were low, as if they were afraid of disturbing something. Their eyes swept upstairs from time to time. What was upstairs? What's wrong with these people? Ning Xuemore looked at Ji Yunhuang with a questioning gaze. Ji Yunhuang slightly furrowed his brows. It was obvious that he did not know the inside story. He looked at the waiter who was leading the way. The shop assistant was quick-witted. He immediately bowed and said, "Your Highness, Master Han Shanyu is upstairs painting." His voice was low, and when he said the 3 words Han Shanyu, it was especially low and respectful. Ning Xuemore raised her eyebrows. Not only did she know the name of this Han Shanyu, it was like thunder in her ears. The 3 words Han Shanyu represented the 3 most. The most famous painting saint on the continent, the most famous fortune-teller on the continent, he was the most mysterious expert on the continent. Experts all had weird tempers. Even if some people were not experts, they would still develop weird tempers in order to pretend to be experts, let alone real experts. This Han Shanyu was one of the best, and was the most outstanding among the freaks. He was so cool and clean that everything he used could not have a single flaw. Wherever he went, he had to use clean water to clean it, and the people who served him had to burn incense and bathe. He did not paint casually, but every painting he made was a priceless treasure. His fortune-telling was accurate, but he did it based on his preferences. If he did not want to tell the fortune of the current emperor, he would not buy it. He also had unfathomable kung fu. Chapter 308. The reason why he was said to be mysterious was not because he was the best in martial arts and was unrivaled in the world, but because he was indifferent and would not easily fight with others. Once he fought, he had never lost. Since he was the art saint, he naturally did not lack money. Moreover, he did not keep a low profile in the way he dressed. Any random accessory on his body was worth tens of thousands of gold. Some items were even worth hundreds of thousands of gold. No matter where he went, he was like a moving treasure trove. This kind of person naturally attracted the attention of people from all walks of the martial arts world. There were countless people who wanted to plot against him to make a fortune. But it was strange. This Han Shanyu was obviously just one person. No matter how many people those gangs sent to kill him, they were all like meat buns thrown to a dog, never to return. No one had ever seen him in action. Those who had seen him were no longer living in this world. His whereabouts were uncertain. On this continent, he had been seen in all 5 countries. No one knew where he lived. It was as if he suddenly appeared when he was supposed to. And when he left, there was no sign of him at all. As he walked, he disappeared. There were once busybodies who followed him, but they could not find him halfway. Some said that he disappeared into thin air, while others said that he rode the clouds and left. In short, the rumors were very mysterious. This also made him even more mysterious. Ning Xuemore did not expect that she would meet this great god in a trip to the tea house today. Her heart was filled with curiosity. So when Ji Yunhuang found out that the upper floors of this tea house were all booked by Mr. Han Shanyu, and that they could only drink tea downstairs, he suggested that they go to another tea house, but was rejected by her. She picked a seat that faced the stairs and sat down. She smiled and said, "Your Highness, let's talk here." She waved her hand and asked the waiter to bring 2 pots of good tea. Ji Yunhuang looked at her with a complicated expression. The things he wanted to talk to her about needed to be discussed in a quiet room, and not in this hall where there were other customers. But now, he did not want to go against her wishes. This time, she was obviously much colder to him. If she was angry and ignored him, he would have the confidence to coax her. But she was neither cold nor warm to him, and was very polite. It made him feel a kind of fear that he would never be able to get her back. When His Highness the Crown Prince came, the waiters in the tea house naturally didn't dare to be negligent. The tea was the best tea, the pot was the best pot, and the snacks were also the best snacks. Ning Xuemore glanced at the small red clay pot. She naturally recognized this pot. It was the same model she used last time. It should be a new one. It seemed like this crown prince wanted to evoke her nostalgia and make her forget the unhappy past. The crown prince was quite attentive. Unfortunately, Ji Yunhuang seemed to be an expert in brewing kung fu tea. He personally brewed the tea, and his movements were smooth and fluid. His every movement was filled with the free and easy demeanor of a noble, which was very pleasing to the eyes. Ji Yunhuang, the crown prince, did not keep a low profile, so the citizens of the capital were not unfamiliar with him. This was especially true for the customers of the tea house. Most of them were officials and nobles, so they were naturally more familiar with him. When Ji Yunhuang came in with Ning Xuemo, there were many people who stood up to greet him, but Ji Yunhuang dealt with them with a few words. These people knew that the crown prince did not want to be disturbed, so they did not dare to come close to him. But they still paid attention to the table. Chapter 309. These people diverted part of their attention to pay attention to the movements of this table. Seeing that Ji Yunhuang was personally brewing tea for the girl in front of him, they all widened their eyes in surprise. They secretly sized up Ning Xuemo, trying to guess her identity. Since they noticed her, they naturally noticed the blue cat with glossy fur lying on her lap. The cat's 2 hind legs were standing on her lap, and its 2 front paws were holding a piece of tea. It was eating it in small bites, and it was eating very delicately and elegantly. It squinted its eyes slightly, obviously enjoying the food. Its expression was too rich, attracting the attention of half of the people in the tea house. There were some young girls drinking tea in the tea house, and their eyes would occasionally look at the blue cat, wishing that they could hug it and touch it. Xuemo, try my culinary skills. Ji Yunhuang handed over a cup of tea. Ning Xuemo did not decline. She took the cup and took a sip. Your Highness, tea brewing skills are brilliant. The blue cat immediately raised its head and said, Master, I want to drink too. Heavens, this cat can talk. Its voice was very pleasant to hear, much better than the parrot. Everyone's gazes became even brighter. Under everyone's gaze, Ning Xuemo casually placed the teacup in front of the blue cat. The cat picked it up with its 2 front paws and tasted it like a human. Not bad. It raised its head and drank it in one gulp. Everyone was speechless. Did this cat become a spirit? Its every action was like a human's are. Also, this girl actually gave the tea that the crown prince poured for her to the cat. Wasn't this too disrespectful to the crown prince? Everyone's gazes secretly looked at Ji Yunhuang's expression. Ji Yunhuang did not bat an eyelid. He took another teacup and poured another cup for her. Come, drink this. Many thanks, Your Highness. Ning Xuemo thanked him again. Xuemo, must you be so polite to me? Ji Yunhuang's eyes darkened. I'm not being courteous. It's the proper etiquette I should have in front of Your Highness the Crown Prince. Ning Xuemo smiled faintly. Ji Yunhuang seemed to be choked by her words and paused for a moment. You weren't like this before. Originally, it was Xuemo who was young and insensible. Please don't blame me, Your Highness. I would rather you treat me like how you did in the past. Ji Yunhuang's eyes darkened. Ning Xuemo raised her hand and took a sip of tea. Her smile became more clear. The past is the past. Your Highness, no one can go back to the past. Was there really no way to return to the past? No, he couldn't accept it. Ji Yunhuang looked at her calm demeanor and sighed softly. Xuemo, you've changed. Ning Xuemo didn't care at all. Your Highness, no one stays the same. Are you still blaming me? Ji Yunhuang frowned bitterly. Your Highness worries too much. How could Xuemo blame Your Highness? Your Highness protecting your own sister is a matter of course. After all, I'm just an orphan of the Marquis mansion, an outsider. Ning Xuemo's tone was indifferent. Xuemo, I know it was Yunyao's fault that day. I wronged you. Your injuries, are they serious? These past 2 days, I've been looking for you in the Heavenly Book Mountain. I was afraid that you might have met with an accident. Your Highness, don't worry. Xuemo's injuries have already healed. Your Highness doesn't need to worry. The 2 of them exchanged a few more words. Ning Xuemo remained indifferent, polite, and distant. Ji Yunhuang tried his best to pull the 2 of them closer, but to no avail. Chapter 310. The blue cat was eating to its heart's content. While the 2 of them were talking, it had already swallowed 2 plates of pastries and 3 cups of tea. The Crown Prince looked at Ning Xuemore again and his eyes slightly moved. Xuemore, you've changed. Ning Xuemore raised her hand and rubbed her forehead. Your Highness, you just said this once. No, I'm talking about your figure and appearance. In just 2 days, you've grown a lot. She was originally a beauty, but at that time, her beauty was that of a child's innocence and cuteness. Now, she had the charm of a young girl. He had not seen her for 2 days. How could she change so much? Ji Yunhuang's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist, wanting to check the psychokinesis in her body. However, just as his fingers touched Xuemore's soft and tender skin, she flipped her wrist and unexpectedly escaped from his palm like a slippery fish. Hey, what are you doing? The little blue cat jumped onto the table and roared at Ji Yunhuang. It had been unhappy with this man for a long time. A younger sister had injured its master for the sake of that unreasonable younger sister of his. Could it be that she still wanted to harm its master now? Ji Yunhuang was stunned. This human and beast were obviously on guard against him, which made him feel a little hurt. He bitterly smiled and stared at Ning Xuemore. Xuemore, I just want to check your psychokinesis. I don't have any other intentions. Ning Xuemore carried the angry blue cat off the table and raised her head with a smile. Xuemore is a psychokinesis trash. Didn't you already test it? Why does your Highness need to test it again? Ah, no wonder I found her familiar. So she's that psychokinesis trash, Ning Xuemore. Someone at the table next to them blurted out. This person's voice was not soft and the tea house was quiet. Almost everyone in the tea house heard him. Almost everyone's eyes were burning as they looked at her, unscrupulously sizing her up from head to toe. The originally quiet hall began to be filled with buzzing noises. Those people were apprehensive of Ji Yunhuang's presence, so they all lowered their voices and discussed with the people at the same table. From time to time, they would exchange looks of understanding. Karine's ears were sharp, and she heard all their voices. It was nothing more than, so it really is her. Wasn't she captured by bandits? Why is she with the Crown Prince again? A piece of trash dares to put on airs in front of the Crown Prince. I really don't know what she's so arrogant about. By the way, I heard that before the ancestor left, he gave the Emperor a message. Could it be related to this woman? Ah! What did the ancestor say? How come I didn't know about it? Tell me quickly. Quick, tell me. The ancestor spoke in Zen language. Aya, that sentence is too profound, I can't remember it at the moment. I think he said something like a jinx or something. My father heard it with his own ears, so it can't be wrong. Bang! The teacup in Ji Yunhuang's hand suddenly fell to the ground. This clear and loud sound caused the entire hall to quiet down. The buzzing sounds of discussion finally stopped. Everyone's gaze landed on Ji Yunhuang. Ji Yunhuang's voice was indifferent. Those who speak nonsense will be killed without mercy. His imposing manner was astonishing. Most of the people present were the children of the country's high officials and nobles. They were still very afraid of this Crown Prince. When his gaze swept past them, they all lowered their heads. Ji Yunhuang secretly took a deep breath, as if he had finally decided on something. He said in a deep voice, "This Miss Ning is the daughter of Marquis Jing Yuan. She is intelligent and sensible. This prince admires her very much. In the future, I will marry her as." Chapter 311. Before he could say the words Crown Princesses, a cold voice suddenly came from upstairs. Who is making a ruckus downstairs? The voice was like ice and snow, flowing past everyone's ears. It was the end of summer, and the weather was still a little hot. In this era, there was no air conditioning, so even the best tea house's indoor temperature was still very high. But when this voice came out, everyone felt as if they had suddenly drunk a cup of iced tea. Their bodies felt cold, and their spirits were lifted. Ning Xuemore's heart also jumped. Hearing the voice, she raised her head and saw a person appear at the staircase. When this person appeared, everyone's eyes lit up. It was as if the entire tea house's taste had been raised by several levels in an instant. It was a young man who looked to be about 20 years old. He was wearing a loose moonlight robe. The robe was like a painting, with a mountain rock and a cluster of bamboos. As he moved, the shadow of the bamboos was reflected on the mountain rock, as if it was dancing under the moonlight. It made people feel as if they were in a forest, and they could feel the sounds of nature. This person stood on the stairs, and the light behind him made his face blurry. His appearance could not be seen clearly, but he vaguely felt that he was very handsome, very elegant, and very extraordinary. In the darkness of the candlelight behind him, he was like a top zither player playing the high mountains and flowing water, making people forget everything. Almost everyone in the hall held their breath. Han Shan-yu. Needless to say, this person was the legendary Han Shan-yu. He was indeed like the cold moonlight on the cold mountain, making people feel as if their hearts were cleansed by the moonlight. Han Shan-yu's gaze slowly swept across the hall, pausing on the little blue cat. His eyes moved again, and finally fell on Ning Xuemore's face. He stood in a place with his back to the light, so Ning Xuemore could not see his face clearly, but she could clearly feel his gaze. She subconsciously met his gaze. That gaze seemed to have a penetrating power, making her heart jump again. She felt a sense of familiarity. It was a bit like when the ancestor looked at her through the palanquin. There was also an inexplicable sense of familiarity, making her heart suddenly tremble. You. Han Shan-yu's gaze fell on Ning Xuemore. Come up. Ah. Why did he call her? Other than the blue cat beside her, which was rather eye-catching, there was nothing special about her. Why did this arrogant Han Shan-yu suddenly ask her to go up? She wasn't close to him. A bunch of bright gazes turned to Ning Xuemore. Their gazes were filled with all kinds of emotions. Some were surprised, some were puzzled, and some were gloating. Of course, those young girls looked at her with eyes full of jealousy. He was obviously a well-known piece of trash, so why did so many experts treat him favorably? The ancestor had once sent a servant to serve as a judge for her, and the crown prince had saved her many times. Lehin Thai had even wanted to make her his concubine. Now, this mysterious and otherworldly person, Han Shan-yu, had personally asked her to go up. Had all these big shots been bewitched by this little girl? Why? Ning Xuemore naturally felt the malice coming from all directions. Especially that jealous gaze, she couldn't be more familiar with it. Whether it was in her previous life or this life, she was often baptized by such gazes. She had long been numb. Sir, the one who made some noise and disturbed your painting was me. If you have any dissatisfaction, I apologize to you. This girl is innocent. Chapter 312. Mr. The one who made some noise and disturbed Mr.'s painting was me. If Mr. is dissatisfied, I will apologize to Mr. This young lady is innocent. Ji Yunhuang extended his hand and pulled Ning Xuemore behind him without batting an eyelid. Then, he stepped forward bravely and lightly shouldered the responsibility. Ning Xuemore's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Ji Yunhuang's back with a complicated gaze. As long as this crown prince did not implicate his sister, he treated her quite well. This matter happened because of me. Your Highness, you don't have to take responsibility for me. Ning Xuemore came out from behind Ji Yunhuang. She was not worried about the debts that she had accumulated. Anyway, there were many people who wanted to make things difficult for her. She did not need this strange person in front of her. Moreover, Ning Xuemore had an intuition that this strange person would not make things difficult for her. No, this matter has nothing to do with Xuemore. I was the one who made a ruckus. I was also the one who threw the cup. Ji Yunhuang pulled Ning Xuemore again, wanting to pull her back. Han Shan-yu stood on the stairs and looked at the two of them who were trying to make excuses for each other. His dark eyes narrowed slightly, looking somewhat unfathomable. The two of you can come up together, he said faintly and turned around to go up the stairs. Ning Xuemore and Ji Yunhuang looked at each other. Ning Xuemore did not care. She would go up. It was just a ruckus. What could this strange person do to her? She lifted her leg and was about to go up the stairs when Ji Yunhuang pulled her back. I will be in front. A black shadow flashed by the door. Two people who were dressed as imperial bodyguards entered and blocked Ji Yunhuang's path. Their faces were solemn. Your Highness, don't take the risk. Ning Xuemore felt that the two guards were making a fuss over nothing. She was just going to meet a weirdo, the sage of painting. Did they have to make it seem like she was going into a tiger's den? Ji Yunhuang seemed to have read Ning Xuemo's mind and quietly said to her, 3 years ago, there was a rather influential young master who quarreled with someone in front of Han Shanyu, which affected the painting sage's work. He was thrown down the stairs by the painting sage with a wave of his sleeve. He fell until he was half dead and laid in bed for more than a year before he recovered a bit of his vitality. However, his martial arts were completely crippled. So brutal? Ning Xuemo couldn't help but glance upstairs. It was really hard to equate that person with a violent person. Mistress, don't be afraid. I'm here. Karine licked her finger, indicating that she would stick by her side. Xuemo, no matter what, I won't let you get hurt again. Ji Yunhuang held her other hand. He casually pushed aside the 2 imperial bodyguards who were blocking the way. Both of you, step back. His aura was very strong. The 2 imperial bodyguards didn't dare to stop him and could only step aside. Your Highness, please allow us to follow you. No need. Ji Yunhuang waved his hand. Both of you can wait here. Han Shanyu didn't like to have too many people. Moreover, he didn't allow anyone to go against his words. He said that he would let 2 people in, so he wouldn't allow him to bring any more subordinates. Moreover, Ji Yunhuang was also a proud person. His martial arts were considered top-notch in this continent. If he really wanted to fight, he didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to last 3 moves in front of the Sage of Painting. As long as he could last 3 moves, the elite bodyguards he had arranged outside would rush in. Therefore, he didn't need to let his bodyguards take the lead to boost his courage. The 2 imperial bodyguards were also very smart. They immediately understood Ji Yunhuang's intention. They bowed and stepped back, no longer obstructing him. Chapter 313. The 2 guards were also very smart and immediately understood Ji Yunhuang's intention. They bowed and retreated, no longer stopping them. Ji Yunhuang kept holding Ning Xuemo's hand. Ning Xuemo actually did not want to be so close to him, but Ji Yunhuang's fingers held her hand tightly, and she could not break free. She could not use too much strength or directly attack him, so she could only let him hold her hand. Forget it, it's just holding hands, it's not worth anything. In her previous life, she still had arms around her brother's shoulders. The 2 of them went up to the 2nd floor together. Finally, they saw the layout of the 2nd floor. The main hall was a little spacious, but the most eye-catching thing was a round rosewood table. On the table, there was a large piece of drawing paper, paint, brushes, inkstone, everything was there. There were 2 very clean and agile children who were grinding the ink, arranging the paint, and doing some other work. There were no ordinary candles in the main hall, only a large luminous pearl hanging above the drawing table. The luminous pearl was like a small moon, bright but not dazzling, illuminating the whole drawing table. The scene was like a stage, but the spotlight only shone on one side of the stage, and the other places were still dim. Master Han Shanyu stood in the shadow in front of the table, and the luminous pearl shone brightly behind him, but his whole person was like a silhouette. Ning Xuemo stood at the staircase, but she still could not see his face clearly. It seemed that this art saint did not want people to see his face clearly, so he was very good at using the light effect. Although he did not wear a mask, it was not much different from wearing one. Sir, why did you call us up? Ning Xuemo wanted to cup her hands, but when she raised them slightly, she realized that her hand was still in Ji Yunhuang's hand. Han Shanyu looked at them, and his gaze paused on their hands. Karine was lying in Ning Xuemo's arms, and it was also staring at Han Shanyu. It suddenly felt that the temperature of the surrounding air seemed to have dropped a little. Then, its eyes suddenly widened. All the hair on its body stood on end. 9 Supremes. Ning Xuemo could clearly feel that something was wrong with Karine in her arms. She could communicate with Karine telepathically, so she immediately asked, "Little Apple, what's wrong?" Karine looked at Han Shanyu again and paused for a moment before replying, "No, nothing. Yes, it's a little cold." The fur on his body slowly became docile. His heart was beating wildly. It had indeed recognized him, but that person had transmitted his voice to it in time to prevent it from revealing anything. Right now, Karine was most afraid of him. Even though he felt that he would be letting his master down if he didn't reveal this person's identity, he still held himself back and obediently lay down on the ground. He wouldn't harm master, right? That shouldn't be the case. He actually treated its owner quite well. There must be a reason why he didn't want it to say anything now. It was better for it to make a fortune quietly. Ning Xuemore couldn't care less about Kirin's subtle mood changes. Besides, the temperature upstairs was indeed much lower than downstairs. The two servants who were waiting on them had already put on their jackets. If it wasn't for Ning Xuemore's profound cultivation, she would have shivered a few times from the cold when she entered. Han Shanyu pointed at Ji Yunhuang with his sleeve and said, "You stand there." He then pointed at Ning Xuemore and said, "Come and grind the ink for me." He made such a big fuss to call her up just to grind the ink. Chapter 314. Ning Xuemore was a little embarrassed. For such a small request, she naturally wouldn't go against the other party. She took the opportunity to break free from Ji Yunhuang's hand and walked over. Ji Yunhuang was stunned. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but as if he was worried about something, he finally shut his mouth. He only reminded Ning Xuemore behind her back, "Xuemore, be careful." Ning Xuemore did not even turn her head. She only made a peace sign with her hands behind her back to show that she understood. She finally saw the painting that Han Shanyu had just drawn. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. It was a half-finished painting of mountains and rivers. Mountains of different heights were covered by clouds and fog. In the middle of the mountains, there was a waterfall. Beside the waterfall were jagged rocks. This was actually similar to the scenery she had seen on the 9th peak of Qianshu Mountain after the illusion had disappeared. Ning Xuemore raised her eyes to look at Master Han Shanyu. From her position, the master's face was still a little blurry. Even at such a close distance, she still could not see his face clearly. A thought suddenly floated into Ning Xuemore's mind. Could this Master Han Shanyu be the Nine Supremes' illusion? She was shocked by her own thought and could not help but look at him a few more times. Han Shanyu did not look at her and only ordered, "Grind." His palm landed on the half-drawn drawing paper, and the drawing paper suddenly emitted a faint white smoke, and the whole drawing paper instantly disappeared without a trace. Ning Xuemore asked, "Why did you destroy this painting?" She felt a little heartache. That painting had both form and spirit. When she first saw it, she wanted to take a second look. After the second look, she actually had the illusion that she was there. Although Ning Xuemore did not know much about painting, it should be a successful piece of work to be able to easily bring people into the mood of the painting. What a pity it was to destroy it. She could still sell it for a lot of money if it was given to her. "It's dirty," Han Shanyu answered succinctly. The art boy beside him also had a pained expression on his face. They were prodigies in the field of painting, and could be considered as genius artists. This time, they were invited by the tea house to assist Master Han Shanyu. Naturally, they were very willing to come. Just now, when they saw Han Shanyu's painting, they saw how his brush moved like dragons and snakes. The mountains and rivers seemed to come alive under his brush, and they were mesmerized. Although it was only half a painting, in their eyes, it was already a peerless treasure. They didn't expect this master to destroy it just like that. They couldn't even see where the stain was. No matter how he thought about it, the two of them must have startled the great master with their sudden clamor. That was why this peerless masterpiece was destroyed in a single day. The two boys glared at Ning Xuemore with resentment. Ning Xuemore just pretended not to see it. Instead, she smiled and said, "It's just a small flaw. Why are you so demanding?" At this moment, the two children had already unfolded a new piece of paper and smoothed it out. Ning Xuemore was also a nimble person. She grinded the ink in a few seconds. She didn't know why, but the ink seemed to bite her hand. Just as she finished grinding the ink, her fingertips inexplicably cut a small hole. She couldn't retract her hand in time, and a drop of blood dripped into the ink. "Let me grind it again." Ning Xuemore knew that the art saint in front of her was a perfectionist. She resigned herself to her fate and wanted to throw away the ink that was stained with her blood. "It's okay." Han Shanyu raised his hand and pressed it on the ink slab. Ning Xuemore couldn't retract her hand in time, and his hand was pressed on the back of hers. His hand was as cold as ice. Ning Xuemore shivered from the cold. She frowned and was about to withdraw her hand. Chapter 3:15. His palm was as cold as ice, causing Ning Xuemore to shiver from the cold. She frowned and was about to withdraw her hand, but the other party had already withdrawn his hand. He even used a white handkerchief to wipe his hand. Ning Xuemore was speechless. She remained calm and collected as she unhurriedly took out a silk handkerchief from her bosom and wiped the back of her hand where he touched it. Han Shanyu looked at her and did not say anything. He started to paint. His tone was calm as he answered Ning Xuemore's question. Since you can get the best, why would you want the flawed one? I can't tolerate any flaws. He was obviously a perfectionist. Ning Xuemore looked at his spotless outer robe and then looked at his hand that was holding the brush while painting. His fingers were clean and slender, with distinct joints. They were as white as jade. He moved the brush as he wished. Mountains, trees, lakes, gradually appeared under his brush. Ning Xuemore suddenly held her breath. She was familiar with this scene. It was the scene she saw in the illusion, the leaves that were like palms, and the vast lake that was sparkling with clear light. Ning Xuemore was in a trance. It was as if she had walked into the illusion of the 9th peak, the green leaf stage, the little ginseng baby sitting on the stage. The scenes flashed through her mind like a movie. The two painters standing by the side suddenly felt that something was wrong with Ning Xuemore. She stared at the drawing paper while Han Shanyue's brush was flying. The scenes under his brush danced as if they were flying. What was even more strange was that the scenes on the drawing were flashing and disappearing at the same time. Was there something wrong with the brush? The two art assistants widened their eyes and were about to open their mouths when Han Shanyu suddenly glanced at them. The two of them felt dizzy and couldn't think of anything else to ask. They just mechanically helped him out. Ning Xuemore's eyes were like a drunkard. She followed Han Shanyue's brush and the memories of the 9th peak in her mind began to disappear. Ji Yunhuang stood at the door and watched from afar. At first, he was on guard, afraid that Han Shanyu would do something bad to Ning Xuemore. Later, when he saw that Ning Xuemore was only given the job of grinding the ink, he heaved a sigh of relief. He knew a lot about painting and was very curious about what this great master Han Shanyu had painted. He wanted to go forward and take a look, but he was afraid of offending this art saint. He stood there and watched Ning Xuemore's movements. When he saw her standing beside Han Shanyu and staring at the drawing paper as if she was drunk, his heart itched. Finally, Han Shanyu stopped and threw the brush into the brush holder. It's done. Ning Xuemore's body, as if she woke up from a dream. Her legs seemed to have gone numb from standing and her body swayed violently. Be careful. Ji Yunhuang subconsciously wanted to rush over and support her. However, he didn't know what he stepped on. His toes hurt and his legs went numb. He almost fell down and hurriedly held onto the railing next to him. When he steadied himself and looked at Ning Xuemore again, he saw that Han Shanyu had one arm around her and placed her on a chair next to him. Ji Yunhuang was speechless. Was he seeing things? The art saint Han Shanyu, who was usually difficult to approach, was actually helping a girl. However, seeing that he was helping her openly and Ning Xuemore almost fell down, Ji Yunhuang didn't say anything. The numbness in his legs had disappeared. He walked over to Ning Xuemore and looked at her face. Xuemore, are you okay? Chapter 3:16. Ning Xuemore felt as if she had just woken up from a strange dream, but she could not remember what was in the dream. She shook her head and stood up. I'm fine. Have you finished painting? Ji Yunhuang looked at the painting on the table. It was a painting of a mountain with a misty rain. The strokes were experienced and the charm was ethereal. It was indeed a rare painting. However, he felt that the painting was missing something, but he could not tell what it was. Ning Xuemore naturally saw the painting too. She was slightly stunned and felt that the painting she saw just now was not the one in front of her. She looked at the ink on the painting again. It was new and the ink had not dried yet. It was obvious that it was just completed. She shook her head. She was probably too tired these past 2 days. Her mind was a little muddled and she might have seen wrongly. Since you helped me grind the ink, I'll forgive you this time. Han Shanyu opened his mouth and raised his hand to roll up the painting. He handed it to Ning Xuemore. A painting is a gift to a fated person. This painting is yours. Ah! He gave it to her. This master's painting was hard to come by. Ning Xuemore's eyes lit up and she immediately thanked him. Ji Yunhuang also heaved a sigh of relief. He bowed and said, "Thank you, master." He then stretched out his hand to pull Ning Xuemore. "Shall we go too?" This time, Ning Xuemore raised her hand and avoided him. Ji Yunhuang's eyes flashed with sadness. Han Shanyu suddenly opened his mouth again. "Since I'm in a good mood today, I'll give you another divination." Ji Yunhuang's eyes lit up. "Master, please tell me. In the future, when the wind and clouds meet, you will become a dragon. You must break through the barrier of love." Han Shanyu gave him a few words. Ji Yunhuang understood the first sentence. It meant that he would become the emperor in the future. But did he need to break through the barrier of love to become the emperor? Was his barrier of love an obstacle to the throne? It couldn't be. His gaze fell on Ning Xuemore. Would she be an obstacle to his ascension to the throne? That was impossible. Xuemore had no power or influence, and she didn't have many connections with the other princes. How could she hinder his ascension to the throne? Ning Xuemore felt goosebumps all over her body as he stared at her left and right. Without batting an eyelid, she took a step back. Initially, she did have a good impression of the crown prince, but now, she was very sure that she would not fall in love with this crown prince. She smiled and said, "Congratulations, Your Highness. In the future, you will definitely be able to fulfill your wish." Her eyes then fell on Han Shanyu and asked, "What was the divination that Grandmaster gave me?" Han Shanyu spoke slowly, word by word, "Heaven's bane, the fate of a 1,000-year lone phoenix." Ning Xuemore, fuck. Did he think that she was a 1,000-year-old bachelor? Although Ning Xuemore didn't know much about metaphysics such as numerology, she still understood the meaning of these 8 words. To put it simply, she was destined to jinx all her relatives. Whoever was her relatives would be unlucky and would be jinxed to death by her parents, brothers, sisters, husbands, children. None of them would be able to escape. No matter how many times she married, in the end, she would be left alone, facing the autumn wind alone. Ning Xuemore seemed to see her old self, walking alone on the desolate mountain road with a walking stick, gradually disappearing in the sunset. This future was too beautiful, she couldn't imagine it. She was really drunk. This little body was not only a good-for-nothing, but it was also a jinxed star. How unlucky must she be to have transmigrated into this body? Ning Xuemore didn't want to believe it at first. Chapter 317. Ning Xuemore did not want to believe it at first, but when she thought of the original owner of the body, Ning Xuemore's parents who died early, and her brother who died early, she heard that her brother died on the battlefield in the same year she was born. Damn. She was actually able to match the words "heavenly cursed lone star." However, the original owner of the body, Ning Xuemore, had died long ago, so her fate should have changed, right? Perhaps she had already changed her fate when she transmigrated. At the very least, the people she cared about were still alive and well. Ji Yunhuang naturally heard what Han Shanyu said about Ning Xuemore's fate, and his expression changed slightly. Master Han Shanyue's words were actually similar to what the ancestor had said to his imperial father before he left. He remembered that before he left, Lehin Thai suddenly asked the ancestor to calculate Ning Xuemore's fate, and the ancestor said 7 words, 1,000-year lone phoenix roaming the world. Then, the venerable ancestor left with his entourage in front and behind him. However, Lehin Thai remained in a daze for half a day. After that, Lehin Thai gave the order to revoke the imperial edict that conferred Ning Xuemore the title of imperial concubine. After that, he sternly warned him not to have any thoughts about Ning Xuemore anymore. He was actually skeptical about this and didn't really take his father's words to heart. He continued to look for Ning Xuemore everywhere. Later, when he found out that Ning Xuemore had subdued Kirin, he felt that she was not ordinary. Kirins were not only divine beasts, but also auspicious beasts. It was said that wherever this beast appeared, there would be peace and prosperity. He originally wanted to use the fact that Ning Xuemore had subdued Kirine to persuade his father to change his mind and agree to make her his imperial concubine, but he did not expect that the iron-mouthed Han Shanyu would give him a blow to the head. Your Highness. Your Highness. Your Highness, it's not good, something happened to the princess. Suddenly, a young girl's panicked voice came from downstairs. Ji Yunhuang's expression changed slightly. He could tell that the young girl downstairs was Ji Yunyao's personal maid. He could not help but look at Ning Xuemore. Ning Xuemore waved her hand. Your Highness, please go quickly. You don't need to care about me. Ji Yunhuang wanted to say something, but the maid downstairs urged, Your Highness, please go and take a look, the princess is really in trouble. Ji sighed, Xuemore, to go take a look, to find you to look for you to return, I'll to find you later. His figure, he went downstairs in a flash. Ning Xuemore stared blankly at Ji Yunhuang's back. Although she didn't have any feelings for Ji Yunhuang right now, seeing him leave her in this place surrounded by a pack of wolves, she still felt a bit disappointed. You like him? Han Shanue's voice was neither salty nor light, and there was no emotion in it. Her heard, naturally answered. Han Shanyu seemed to be choked by her straightforward answer, and his voice became even fainter. You are not fated to be with him. Ning Xuemore smiled. She suddenly picked up Kirine, who had been squatting on the chair, and kissed the tip of its nose. I also like it. Kirine was so excited that it almost reverted back to its original form. Its pair of blue eyes were watery. Master. Its whole body of blue fur was almost turning pink. Master kissed it. Master smells so good. Kirine happily squinted its eyes, and when it raised its head, it met Han Shanue's eyes. It suddenly shivered and shrunk its neck. Its tail curled up, and it curled up on the chair again. Han Shanyu lightly said, So this is what you like. You will kiss whoever you like. Ning Xuemore smiled. I like to kiss cuter ones, for example. Chapter 318. She then picked up Kirine and kissed it on its eyes. This little guy was too cute. Every time she kissed it, it would cover its face with its paws. Han Shanyu was speechless. He spoke again, You are destined to be a loner, so you must not get too close to others. Otherwise, you will harm them. Ning Xuemore lowered her eyes and thought of number 2. It seemed that what Han Shanyu said was true. Those who were close to her and treated her well were all unlucky. The little Cheline couldn't help but speak. Master, you still have me. I'm not a human. Our lives are tied together. As long as Master is well, I will also be well. As it spoke, it kissed Ning Xuemore's palm. Ning Xuemore touched Kirine's head and was touched. Kirine was such a loyal friend. Even if you are not human, you cannot do it. Han Shanyu continued, No matter who you like, you cannot be too close to them. Otherwise, they will be unlucky. Damn, he made it sound like she was a jinx. She was just a little unlucky recently. In the past, everything was smooth sailing. Her friends in the modern world were so close to her, but they did not die because of her. How could it be as exaggerated as he said? Did this Han Shanyu have a grudge against her? He purposely said that in front of others. She glanced at the 2 children who were watching from the side. She knew in her heart that it wouldn't be long before her reputation as a super jinx would spread throughout the world, just like her reputation as a trash. No one would dare to get close to her in the future. She rolled her eyes, as if she had suffered a blow. Suddenly, she jumped onto Han Shanue's body, hugged his neck, and fiercely kissed him on the cheek. If being close to him would cause bad luck, then she would get closer to him. She would pass on all her bad luck to him. The 2 of them were very close to each other. Her movements were as fast as lightning. Han Shanyu was not prepared at all, so her sneak attack succeeded. He froze. The other 2 children were dumbfounded. Their mouths were so wide open that a duck egg could be stuffed into them. The mysterious, noble, and untainted art saint was kissed by a girl. If this was spread out, it would be a huge scandal. The little Cheline's eyes were also wide open. Master. Master is too valiant. His face was as smooth as jade. When Ning Xuemore got close to him, she could even smell the light and unique fragrance on his body. Ning Xuemore wanted to get back at him, so she wanted to kiss him and leave quickly. However, she was distracted by the faint fragrance on his body. She couldn't escape in time. Impudent. Han Shanue's face darkened as he spat out 2 words. He didn't seem to do anything, but with a wave of his sleeve, Ning Xuemore, who was hugging him, flew out. Crash. Ning Xuemore's body crashed through the window and flew out of the 2nd floor onto the street. There were a lot of people on the street. When they saw a person flying out of the tea house, they were all shocked. When Ning Xuemore landed, she almost stepped on the face of a passing teenager. Fortunately, Ning Xuemore's reaction was fast. While her body was in the air, she immediately adjusted her body and gently landed beside the youth. Damn it. This bastard was really ruthless. He actually threw her down from the 2nd floor. He was quite strong too. She couldn't help but crash into the window. The sandalwood window was smashed by her. The burning pain in her shoulder made Ning Xuemore's face turn pale. She raised her head and looked at the broken window on the 2nd floor. She started to wonder if she should go upstairs to find that person for revenge. Chapter 319. Master. The little Chelene shouted and jumped down from the window. Ning Xuemore reached out to catch it, but this action affected the wound on her arm, and it hurt so much that her little face turned pale. Master, are you okay? Karine worriedly reached out its 2 little claws to touch Ning Xuemore's injured arm. Ah, you're bleeding, it's okay, it's just a superficial wound. Ning Xuemore slapped away Karine's little claws to prevent it from accidentally scratching her again. Little girl, you are indeed bleeding. Why don't you let me take you to the clinic for treatment? A rather glib voice interrupted. Ning Xuemore turned her head and saw that the one who spoke was the young man she had almost hit when she fell from the window. The young man was wearing a flashy purple robe and was waving a fan in his hand. He had a smooth face and a pair of peach blossom eyes that fell on Ning Xuemore's body, which was a little stunning. This girl was delicate and beautiful. Although she was a little embarrassed after being thrown down like this, it could not hide her beauty. Coupled with the bloodstains on her arm, it made her look even more beautiful. This was really a beauty that fell from the sky. The young man with the fan was instantly moved. He looked at Ning Xuemore with eyes that were filled with spring water. Ning Xuemore had a stomach full of anger that she had nowhere to vent. She knew that the young man was flirting with her just by looking at his eyes. Especially his eyes, which were staring at her chest, as if he wanted to extend a pair of hooks from his eyes and hook her clothes so that he could see the scenery under her clothes. She actually met a young thug who was flirting with people on the street. This was a common scene in novels. She really wanted to beat him up. Ning Xuemore pursed her lips. My injury. It's not a big deal. I don't want to trouble you. Her voice was as delicate as an oriole's. She turned around and wanted to leave, but the young man opened his fan and blocked her way. Little girl, it's better to follow me. That's right, that's right. Follow my young master. My young master will treat you well. That's right. Our young master has always been kind and loves to show mercy to women. You almost hit our young master just now, but our young master didn't make a fuss about it. Don't fail to appreciate our kindness. Obediently follow our young master. In the blink of an eye, 4 or 5 more servants surrounded Ning Xuemore, intentionally or unintentionally surrounding her in the middle. It was obvious that these people were the young man's henchmen and were used to cooperating with their young master. Karine was annoyed and wanted to scratch her with its claws. Ning Xuemore pressed Karine's head to calm it down. She blinked her eyes and said, "Child, are you really taking me to the medical center for treatment?" Her eyes were watery, and when she blinked, half of the young master's bones melted. That's right. Young lady, feel free to follow this young master. Come, I know the most famous doctor who can bandage your injury properly. He reached out his wolf claws to hold Ning Xuemore's little hand. Before Ning Xuemore could react, Karine couldn't help but scratch him with its claws. Its movements were as fast as lightning, and the young master couldn't dodge in time. 3 deep blood grooves appeared on the back of his hand. The young master screamed and jumped up, shaking his hand desperately. My hand. Karine scratched him with its claws, and the blood in the grooves flowed freely. In the blink of an eye, the young master's wolf claws turned into bloody claws. Chapter 320. How dare you hurt our young master? You must be tired of living. Our young master is the only son of Duke Ding. Kill this cat. All the servants aggressively surrounded her, wanting to snatch away the Kirin in Ning Xuemore's arms. Ning Xuemore also frowned and lifted Kirin by the back of its neck. Little apple, who allowed you to randomly use your claws? Look, aren't your claws dirty? His other hand took out a piece of silk from who knows where and carefully wiped the little Chilean's claw, wiping away the bloodstains on it. Finally, he casually threw the silk away. All the servants were speechless. The young master's face turned green. How dare you? You actually let your cat hurt people. Men, take her down, the young master ordered in a flustered and exasperated manner. All the servants answered in unison, yes. They stretched out their hands to grab Ning Xuemore. Ning Xuemore's eyes flashed with killing intent. Just as she was about to do something, a shadow suddenly appeared. A black shadow flashed from the side, and everyone only saw a blur in front of their eyes. Suddenly, 4 people directly crashed into the circle of people. As the shadows moved, the servants were thrown out one by one, wailing incessantly. When the dust settled, the servants surrounding Ning Xuemore were already lying on the ground. 4 of them who looked like imperial bodyguards bowed to Ning Xuemore. Miss, you have been frightened. Ning Xuemore sized up the 4 of them. You are. Reporting to Miss, we were sent by the Crown Prince to protect Miss Ning. One of them respectfully replied. It turned out that Ji Yunhuang did not abandon her and even sent 4 imperial bodyguards to protect her. Ning Xuemore also recognized one of the imperial bodyguards. He was indeed from the Crown Prince's residence. She had met him once when she stayed in the Crown Prince's residence for a short period of time. She nodded and indifferently glanced at the young master with the fan who was trembling at the side. Does this young master still want to take me down? Although the fan bro wasn't beaten up, he was almost scared to the point of wetting his pant. He didn't expect that the little girl in front of him, who didn't even bring a maid, was actually the person that His Highness the Crown Prince wanted to protect. Even if he had 8 guts, he wouldn't dare to challenge His Highness the Crown Prince. At this moment, seeing these 4 personal guards of the Crown Prince's residence, how could he dare to let out half a fart? He hurriedly smiled apologetically. It's a misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. The servants were ignorant and scared the young lady. Please forgive us, then don't kill my cat. Ning Xuemore raised her eyebrows. Of course not. Miss, your cat is very clever. Hey, very clever, it's a good cat. The man with the fan smiled apologetically as he signaled to the servants who had just gotten up from the ground. The group of people left with their tails between their legs. Miss, do you want to return to the residence or go to the medical center to have a look? The leader of the 4 imperial bodyguards asked. Let's go back. Ning Xuemore waved her hand dispiritedly. She could deal with the small wound on her shoulder by herself. She glanced at the window on the 2nd floor again. The big hole was still there, but the light inside was much dimmer, as if the person inside had already left. Forget it, she wouldn't lower herself to the same level as that person. The current her wasn't that person's opponent at all. She hugged the cat and turned around to leave. Strangely, she felt that the smell of that person was somewhat familiar, as if she had smelled it from an old friend. But she couldn't remember who it was at that moment. She kept feeling that she had forgotten something, but she couldn't remember what it was at that moment. Inside the 2nd floor 2 little art boys stood at the side, trembling, while that Master Han Shan Yu stood in front of the table with an expressionless face. Chapter 321. The painting he drew was still on the table. Ning Xuemore didn't have time to take it away. This girl's behavior was too frivolous. She shouldn't be able to recognize him and didn't know who he was. To her, it should be the first time they met. She actually hugged him and kissed him without any hesitation. Did she like to be close to men so much? She was obviously a genius, but her behavior was so unrestrained. How many people had she kissed? He didn't go near the window, but he seemed to be able to see everything that was happening on the street. The two children only felt that the temperature in the room was getting lower and lower. They stole a glance at Master Han Shanua's face, but due to the angle of the light, they still couldn't see his face clearly. They could only faintly feel that this master seemed to be in a bad mood. One of the children plucked up his courage and said, "Master, you don't need to lower yourself to the same level as this vulgar girl. She doesn't deserve this painting, you deserve it." These two words were thrown over. It directly made the child shiver and shut his mouth. Han Shanyu raised his sleeve. The peerless painting on the table spontaneously combusted and turned into a pile of ashes. The two children opened their mouths, but didn't dare to say anything. They watched the painting burn. Suddenly, their eyes were in a daze. The people in the tea house's hall naturally heard the commotion on the second floor. Everyone was bewildered. The owner of the tea house courteously asked a few questions upstairs, but he didn't get any response. After a while, the owner finally carefully went upstairs to check. However, he found that there was no trace of the art saint upstairs. Only the two children were left standing there in a daze. The owner asked them a few times before the two children seemed to come back to their senses. However, their eyes were blank. They actually forgot more than half of what happened just now. The owner asked them for a long time, but he didn't get any information. They didn't even know when the art saint left. One of the children was in a daze for a moment. Suddenly, he seemed to remember something and shouted, "I remember now. Master Art Saint said that girl is a jinx, a 1,000-year-old lone phoenix." A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone who came up to watch the show was stunned. The people of this world naturally understood what this heavenly cursed lone star meant. That orphan girl of Marquis Jingyuan's mansion was a heavenly calamity, an unprecedented jinx, a jinx. No wonder Marquis Jingyuan and his wife died early. Even their only son died on the battlefield. So it was because of this daughter. The sixth prince had already broken off the engagement with her, but he was still beaten up because of her. He was stripped of his official position and became a commoner. The crown prince was also a little infatuated with her because he was a little closer to her. Therefore, he was severely reprimanded by the emperor, in just one night. The rumor that Ning Xuemore was a jinx had spread throughout the city and was still spreading at the speed of light. Within a few days, Ning Xuemore's life had undergone earth-shattering changes. First, the maids and servants in the mansion came to resign. No matter how high the salary old Zhong offered them, they were determined not to stay. Money was indeed a good thing, but one had to be alive to take it, right? Taking care of a heavenly calamity, they might lose their lives here. In less than 5 days, old Zhong was the only one left in the bustling and lively Marquis Jingyuan's mansion. Old Zhong was very upset. Chapter 322. Old Zhong was very uncomfortable. These days, the little master had painstakingly managed the Marquis Jingyuan mansion to get on the right track with great difficulty. He didn't expect that the art sage's prophecy would turn the Marquis Jingyuan mansion back to its original state. It became the most depressed and desolate place. These days, he had been running around, wanting to hire some people with high salaries. However, Ning Xuemore's reputation as a heavenly calamity star was even more resounding than her reputation as a trash. When the people who were looking for work outside heard that the mansion was recruiting, they all shook their heads like a rattledrum and refused to come no matter what. Old Zhong ran around outside for 6 or 7 days, but he still couldn't find a single person. On this day, he came back with a gloomy face and looked everywhere for Ning Xuemore. Finally, he found her in the side hall of the chastity testing beast. Compared to old Zhong's gloomy face and worried heart, Ning Xuemore was a lot calmer. Nothing could be seen on her face. She still looked very carefree. She refined medicine as usual, practiced martial arts as usual, ate as usual, and even strolled around the garden admiring the flowers as usual. Old Zhong felt that the little master's heart must be very bitter. She was just putting up a front and didn't want others to see her as a joke. The little master's attitude was really good. For example, right now, she was chatting and drinking with the ferocious chastity testing beast. Her face was very comfortable. Little master. Old Zhong walked in. "Uncle Zhong, you came back. Come, Come and drink 2 cups. Look at how sweaty you are after running around. Ning Xuemore gave him a praying mat and poured him a cup of wine. Old Zhong felt even more guilty. Little master, this old servant is useless. I still couldn't find anyone. Ning Xuemore smiled. It's fine if you can't find anyone. This matter can't be rushed. We'll talk about it later. Come, let's eat first. These days, even the cooks in the kitchen had all run away. Ning Xuemore simply ordered takeout from a restaurant outside. The food looked, smelled, and tasted good. It was even better than the food made by the original cooks. Although the current Marquis Jingyuan's mansion was as cold and cheerless as before, Ning Xuemore was no longer the same as before. Now that she had an endless amount of money to spend, she naturally wouldn't suffer. Old Zhong saw that Ning Xuemore was smiling and her little face was rosy. She didn't look worried and haggard at all. He asked tentatively, "Little master, in the future, what if we can't recruit people?" Ning Xuemore smiled and reached out to pat him on the shoulder. "If you can't recruit them, then so be it. Didn't we go through the same thing before?" That was true. Marquis Jingyuan's mansion had been deserted for several years already. As long as she was a bit more diligent, these rooms could still be tidied up. It's all that Han Shanue's fault. Why did he have to say that my miss is a jinx? Just a simple sentence from him could make his young miss fall into hell. Right now, they were only unable to recruit servants. What would happen if the young miss were to find a husband in the future? With such a reputation, who would dare to propose marriage? What if Miss couldn't get married in the future? How could he face the Marquis and his wife? Old Zhong was worried. He was really worried. His face was wrinkled like a walnut. "Uncle Zhong, you're also old. If you want to leave, I can give you a large sum of money." Ning Xuemore opened her mouth. "No. Old Zhong swears to follow little master to death." Old Zhong immediately interrupted her. His face was flushed red. "Miss, what kind of person do you think I, Old Zhong, am? Since you want to follow me, then be happy." Ning Xuemore took a cup of wine and handed it over. "In this world, there's no obstacle that can't be overcome. It's not the end of the world yet. Why are you so worried? Come, have a cup of wine." Chapter 323. Old Zhong was startled. He took the cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. "That's right, there's no obstacle that can't be overcome." Ning Xuemore leisurely smiled. "That's right." Old Zhong drank 3 cups of wine in a row and added, "There will definitely be a wise hero who will take a fancy to Miss and marry Miss." Fat. Ning Xuemore spat out a mouthful of wine. So this was the reason why Old Zhong had such a worried expression on his face for such a long time. He was worried about her marriage. "Uncle Zhong, I'm only 13 years old. Why are you so anxious about marriage? I feel that my current situation is actually quite good." Ning Xuemore sat cross-legged and lazily said, "Miss is naturally not old now, but in our Chong Kong country, if a girl is 15 years old and still can't find a husband, she will be criticized." Old Zhong was still worried. "There are still 2 years left. There's no hurry." Ning Xuemore didn't care at all and drank another cup of wine. "Come, this restaurant's crystal prawns are pretty good. Uncle Zhong, have a taste." She successfully shut Old Zhong's mouth from worrying about her marriage. Ning Xuemore truly felt that this kind of life was actually not bad. After her reputation as a heavenly cursed star came out, although the servants in the mansion had all left, the sects that were eyeing her covetously and wanted to rob her also disappeared without a trace. They were all afraid that she would jinx them to death. Even Kirin and the others didn't dare to covet her anymore. Also, the old emperor's imperial edict to confer her as a consort was silently revoked by the old emperor. 2 days ago, the old emperor summoned her to the palace and asked her a few questions from afar. He expressed his concern for the daughter of a meritorious official and then let her go. He didn't mention anything about conferring her as a consort. As for Ji Yunhuang, ever since he was taken away by a maid in the tea house, he never came to find her again. He was probably frightened by her reputation as a heavenly cursed star and didn't want to have anything to do with her. As for Ji Yunhao, he had already been banished from the city by the old emperor. Without the emperor's summons, he didn't have the qualifications to enter the city. Therefore, Ning Xuemore also didn't see him again. Even if they met, they would probably be strangers. Now that she thought about it, all the problems that caused her headaches had disappeared along with the rumors of her being a heavenly cursed lone star. Her days had become unprecedentedly leisurely. Ever since she had transmigrated, she had been in all kinds of dangerous situations. She had wandered in front of the gates of Yama's palace several times. It could be said that she had narrowly escaped death. It was rare to be able to live such a leisurely life. It was rare for her to have so much time to practice. In just 10 days or so, her inner strength had indeed improved, and even her telekinesis had begun to increase greatly. Yesterday, she had broken through to mortal rank level 4 and was now able to use the psychokinesis in her body as she wished. Ning Xuemore felt very satisfied. The only thing that made her unsatisfied was that she seemed to have forgotten something. For example, she had forgotten who taught her how to cultivate her telekinesis. She had even forgotten how she managed to tame Kirin. When she asked Kirin, this fellow was even more confused than her. After staring at her for a long time, he finally said, "Wasn't it Master who saved me from a cave? That's why I established a contract with you, didn't I?" Ning Xuemore vaguely remembered that there was indeed such a cave. However, her memory seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't remember what happened in the cave. Fortunately, she was the type to look forward. Since she couldn't remember, she might as well not think about it. In any case, Kirin was now by her side, alive and well. That was enough. Chapter 324. Although there were fewer people in the Marquis's mansion, there was also less work to be done. If he made do with it, he could still live a carefree life. The chastity-testing beast was not picky as long as it had wine and food to eat. After all, it was a human soul that lived in its body, so its nest was quite clean and did not need anyone to clean it. It also did not need anyone to wait on it. The only thing that gave her a headache was that there were too many rooms in the Marquis's mansion. Even if old Zhong cleaned it from morning to night, he would not be able to clean it all. Therefore, Ning Xuemore simply asked old Zhong to seal up a few courtyards, leaving only a few that were still in use. It was not bad to clean it up. After eating and drinking to her heart's content, Ning Xuemore got up and ordered old Zhong to prepare the carriage. Today, she would go to Heavenly Book Mountain to pick herbs and hunt again. After a few days of cultivation, Ning Xuemore found that her ability to absorb fire and wood crystals was stronger. She could directly absorb crystals that were 5th level and below. This could help her improve her skills faster. With Kirin by her side, hunting was as easy as flipping her hand. Even the beasts on the mountain were afraid of it. When Kirin heard that they were going to Heavenly Book Mountain to hunt again, it was very happy. It could eat meat again. This time, entering Heavenly Book Mountain was very smooth. Ning Xuemore rode Kirin for less than 8 hours and arrived at the falling flower peak of the 5th peak. More than 10 days ago, Ning Xuemore had brought number 2 here to pick the heavenly ice grass. Now that she was revisiting this place, even the carefree Ning Xuemore felt a little sad. It was on this peak that she and number 2 were taken away by an eagle. Number 2 died miserably on the 9th peak, and she seemed to have taken some risks and finally escaped from the peak. Ning Xuemore felt that her memories of the 9th peak were the most blurry, as if they had been deleted by someone. The heavenly ice grass had changed her body better than ever, so Ning Xuemore wanted to pick it again. She was feeling sad at the bottom of the peak when she suddenly heard the sound of fighting on the peak, mixed with the hissing of snakes. Could it be that someone else had reached the peak before her? Ning Xuemore patted Kirin's head. "Little apple, let's go too." Kirin climbed the mountain as if it were flat ground. In just a few jumps, he had already reached the top of the mountain. Then, Ning Xuemore finally saw the man who was fighting with the 3 snakes. Her heart skipped a beat, and she blurted out, "Shatu." Only after she called out to him did she realize that something was wrong. Shatu was the nickname of bodyguard number 2. He was about 20 years old when he was killed. On the other hand, the young man in front of him looked to be at most 15 or 16 years old. His face was much younger than number 2's, and his body was much thinner. The young man was already injured in many places, and his handsome face had already turned green. It was obvious that he had been poisoned. This young man had good swordsmanship, and his psychokinesis was also not bad. 3 giant pythons besieged him, yet he still could not be taken down. However, he was poisoned after all, and his limbs were no longer as nimble as before. There were a few times when he was entangled by the giant python. This young man could not fight anymore. If he delayed any longer, the snake venom would attack his heart. At that time, even the Deluo Golden Immortals would not be able to save him. Ning Shuemore made a hand gesture to Kirin. Kirin raised his head and roared. His voice was long and drawn out, as if it was swaying down from the sky. The giant snakes and scorpions of the Snake and Scorpion Mountain all trembled and ran away in a split second. The 3 giant pythons besieging the young man also trembled a few times. They did not care about the young man's sword light and turned around to flee. In a split second, they also disappeared without a trace. Ning Shuemore patted Kirin's head. Strange, didn't you roar so loudly that they did not dare to move? Why did they all run away? It's okay if the others ran away, but these 3 snakes cannot be scared away. You have to catch them. I want the snake gall. Chapter 325. Kirin raised its head and said, Master, they are insects, not beasts. It is already good enough that I can scare them away. It is easy to get the snake gall. Wait for me. It ran away quickly, probably to find the 3 giant pythons. The young man staggered and turned around. He saw Ning Shuemore in a light green dress and then looked at Kirin, who ran away. He was a little cautious and held his sword in front of his chest. Suddenly, his vision turned black, and he fell down. The snake venom that he had been suppressing finally took effect. He did not faint yet. He struggled on the ground a few times and wanted to get up. However, his head was dizzy, and the wounds all over his body were numb and painful. He propped himself up halfway and then fell down again. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw the girl in the green dress walking over slowly. What do you want to do? He was even more cautious. Those who could come to the 5th peak were not easy to deal with. The girl in front of him looked less than 13 years old and was riding a Kirin. Was she a mountain spirit or a tree spirit? Ning Shuemore looked at him with her arms crossed. Seeing that his face was as green as the grass under him, she smiled and said, Are you afraid that I will eat you? As she spoke, she had already squatted down and tore open his trousers. The young man was shocked and tried to stab her with his sword. Don't touch me. He was poisoned, but his sword was still very strong. Ning Shuemore extended her hand and grabbed his wrist. With a sweep of her palm, she directly knocked his sword out of his hand. Her pretty face was tense. Don't use your psychokinesis again. Be careful of the snake venom. Her stern face had a murderous aura to it. The young man was stunned, and the palm that he was about to send out again paused. Who exactly are you? Someone who doesn't want you to die. Ning Shuemore's reply was cold and indifferent, but her movements were exceptionally nimble. In the blink of an eye, she had already ripped open all of his clothes covering his wounds. She began to treat his wounds, squeezing out the poisonous blood and applying the snake venom medicine. The young man's face was almost completely red. He had many wounds on his arms, under his ribs, back, chest, calves, and even his upper thigh. If it was a man treating his wounds, he wouldn't feel anything, but the other party was a young girl. He could feel the other party's soft and warm hands moving and squeezing around his wound. That kind of touch caused an indescribable feeling to surge in his heart. You. He seemed to want to say something, but Ning Shuemore knocked the back of his neck. Shut up. When she was practicing medicine, she hated it when her patients chatted with her. The young man finally shut his mouth and fainted. Ning Shuemore glanced at him, and her eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. If an ordinary martial artist had been poisoned by such a deep snake venom, they would have already lost consciousness and foamed at the mouth. This young man was actually able to hold on until now without fainting. He could be considered a weirdo. Looking at his face that was 80% similar to number 2's, who was he to number 2? Younger brother? She dealt with the wounds quickly and professionally. After half an hour, the wounds on the youth's body had been cleaned up by her and the places that needed to be bandaged were all bandaged up. This time, she came here with a complete set of things. Bandages, antivenom, medicine. Everything was here. She had originally prepared them for herself, but she didn't expect to use most of them on this young man. Master, the snake gallbladders are here. Karine rushed back like a whirlwind and brought back 3 snake gallbladders. Chapter 326. Ning Xuemore looked at the 3 snake gallbladders, which were bigger than goose eggs, and her lips twitched. She had forgotten that the snakes were giant pythons. The young man was bitten by 3 giant pythons, so she had to give him some of the bile in the gallbladders. The young man was awakened by the bitter taste. He wanted to spit out the bitter taste in his mouth, but Ning Xuemore pinched his chin and said, "Swallow it. It will save your life." The young man was slightly stunned, but he could only swallow it with his teeth clenched. After swallowing 2 mouthfuls, his throat was trembling because of the bitter taste. Finally, he finished 1 gallbladder. Before he could breathe a sigh of relief, the second gallbladder came close to his lips and said, "Here, there are 2 more." The young man was speechless. The young man finally finished the 3 gallbladders, and the snake venom was removed. His face turned green because of the bitter taste. However, the dizziness and nausea were alleviated. He turned over and wanted to get up, but he suddenly felt that his body was stiff. He looked down and saw bandages all over his body. He was tied up like a mummy. "All right, you're lucky to have your life back." Ning Xuemore clapped her hands and stood up. She asked Karine to get some water to wash her hands. The young man looked at her with his eyes wide open, and his expression was complicated. Why did you save me?" He did not know this girl, right? And on such a dangerous snake-scorpion peak, what was her goal? Ning Xuemore glanced at him and said, "I saved you for fun. You can go down the mountain by yourself. I have something to do, so I won't accompany you." She patted Karine's head and said, "Little apple, let's go." She still needed to pick herbs. The young man struggled on the ground and finally sat up. Because of the smell of Karine, all the snakes and insects did not dare to come close. He gritted his teeth, picked up the sword that had fallen next to him, and stood up stiffly. However, he had just been removed from the snake venom, and he had lost too much blood. After standing up, he felt dizzy. Finally, he could not support himself and fell to the ground again. "You can't move around casually now. It's better for you to rest for an hour. Don't worry, I've already asked Karine to pee around. No snakes or insects will attack you." After saying that, Ning Xuemore turned around and rode away on Karine. The young man was stunned for a moment as he watched her leave. He closed his eyes slightly, took a deep breath, and began to regulate his breathing. He didn't want to die, he had to live on. He still had to pick the heavenly ice grass. After an unknown amount of time, the young man finally finished recuperating and regained some strength. He opened his eyes and was stunned for a moment. It was unknown when the green-clothed girl had returned. In her palm, there was a faint blue grass that was trembling slightly. Heavenly ice grass. The young man's eyes lit up. He looked at the young girl. Didn't you risk your life to come here for this stalk of grass?" Ning Xuemore said. Her voice was still indifferent. "I picked an extra stalk just now. I'll give it to you." That young man, he slowly reached out and took the stalk of grass. He gently placed it into his mouth and slowly ate it. He did not say the word thank you because it was too light. Ning Xuemore took advantage of the time when the young man was meditating and left on Karine. Since the young man could come here with a broken sword, it proved that he had extraordinary abilities. As long as the snake venom was removed, he would be able to leave the mountain alive. "Master, do you know him?" Karine had been holding it in all the way. When they were about to reach the foot of the mountain, he finally could not hold it in anymore and asked. Chapter 327. Ning Xuemore shook her head. "I don't know him. She only saved him because she saw the face that resembled number 2's. This person is too much. You saved his life and gave him a stalk of grass. He didn't even say thank you. How rude. Karine was a little angry. I don't have to ask for something in return for a favor. I don't need a thank you from him. He's much better than that red-clothed pervert. That guy was the real one who repaid kindness with ingratitude. Fortunately, he was tricked into the water by her. Speaking of which, was that pervert eaten by the monsters? He hasn't appeared for so many days. He should be dead, right? What a pity. Where did he hide that good zither? Ning Xuemore shook her head and decided not to think about this annoying problem. She yawned and said, "Let's go. I'm sleepy." The matter of Ning Xuemore subduing a Cheline had long been known by everyone. Therefore, recently, the little Cheline frequently appeared in the city in its original form. Aside from attracting people's attention, nothing else happened and no one dared to have any ideas about it. If they caught it, they would have to catch that jinx, Ning Xuemore. Jinxes were the bane of people. This time, Ning Xuemore was a little tired. She simply let Karine carry her in its original form and run into the city. As expected, it attracted the attention of passers-by. Occasionally, the sound of discussion drifted into her ears. "Is the one who just passed by Miss Ning?" "Yes, it's that jinx, sure, stay away from her. Don't get the bad luck." "Yes, yes. When we get home, we should wash off the bad luck." The two of them were in a heated discussion. Suddenly, there were two whooshing sounds in front of them. The two of them looked up and saw two black balls flying into their mouths. It smelled fishy. The two of them almost choked to death. They hurriedly pulled the balls out of their mouths. When they looked down, they vomited. What blocked their mouths were actually two balls of fresh donkey dung. A girl's laughter came from the front. Her laughter was like a silver bell swaying all the way. "Master, good aim," Karine praised. Its little master didn't even look back. She just flicked the willow branch she was playing with on the ground, and the two balls of donkey dung automatically flew backward. Ning Xuemore patted her small mouth and yawned. "Of course, your little master was number one in hidden weapons that day." While they were speaking, they had already arrived at the city gates. Ning Xuemore had just arrived when a group of soldiers suddenly gathered at the city gate. "You're back." "She's back." Ning Xuemore frowned. She hadn't done anything wrong recently, had she? Why were the soldiers surrounding her? Just as she was about to ask, the crowd parted and a black-clothed bodyguard knelt down in front of her. "Miss Ning, please save our crown prince." Ning Xuemore, she had already recognized that person as Ji Yunhuang's personal bodyguard, whom she had met 2 or 3 times before. His name was Lei Liu. "What happened to your crown prince?" "His Highness, he was seriously injured and his life is at stake." Ning Xuemore raised her eyebrows and immediately said, "Let's go to the crown prince's residence." "Lei Liu, tell me in detail how he got injured." The crown prince's residence, which used to be orderly and well-trained, was now in chaos. The crown prince's aides, civil and military officials, and even Lehin Thai were all gathered in the crown prince's residence. The imperial physicians in the palace and all the famous doctors in the capital were urgently summoned to the crown prince's residence. Chapter 328. Inside the crown prince's bedroom, Ji Yunhuang's face was as pale as a sheet. He was lying on the bed with his teeth clenched, not moving an inch. A doctor was trembling in fear as he examined him. Lehin Thai's face was as calm as water as he paced back and forth in the main hall. Oppressive and oppressive, that invisible pressure made everyone unable to breathe. In the corner of the main hall, there was a row of doctors kneeling like quails. All of them had their heads lowered as they were so nervous that they were sweating profusely. After a while, the doctor who was examining the crown prince also knelt down. "Your Majesty." Lehin Thai anxiously asked, "How is it?" The doctor's lips trembled. "Your Majesty, the crown prince's heart was injured. This official is also powerless. Trash." Lehin Thai slammed his palm on the table. "What did I raise all of you for? If anything happens to the crown prince, I will bury all of you trash with him." That doctor also trembled as he knelt down with the other doctors. Cough. Ji Yunhuang, who had been standing straight and motionless, suddenly trembled. A gurgling sound came from his throat. He suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Your Highness." "Huang brother." In a flurry, they wiped away Ji Yunhuang's blood and cleaned him up. Ji Yunyao, who had been standing at the side, looked at Ji Yunhuang, whose face was as white as a sheet, and cried out, "Brother, you must hold on. Woo, if anything happens to you, I don't want to live anymore, shut up." Lehin Thai became even more anxious when he saw her crying. "You still have the face to cry here? If it wasn't for your brother saving you, how could he be injured like this? Shut up, don't disturb him anymore." Ji Yunyao's body trembled as she resisted the urge to cry. Tears flowed down her face. "Your Majesty, Divine Dr. Mo has arrived." A eunuch hurriedly came to report. Lehin Thai's eyes lit up as if he had finally grasped onto a life-saving straw. "Quickly invite him in. Quickly invite him in." Divine Dr. Mo was a young man who looked to be around 30 years old. He was handsome and refined. On this continent, there was no one who did not know of Divine Dr. Mo's name. No one knew who his master was. They only knew that his medical skills were extremely brilliant. He could bring the dead back to life and heal bones. It was unknown how many people on the verge of death had been brought back to life by his miraculous hands. No matter where this person went, he would be treated as a guest of honor. Even the royal families of the 5 countries treated him differently. This person was indeed unique when it came to treating illnesses, but his temper was also strange. He was extremely arrogant and would not allow anyone to question him. Once he was questioned, he would definitely leave. Therefore, everyone who invited him treated him with respect and treated his judgment as an imperial edict. Upon hearing his arrival, not only did Lehin Thai have hope, even the row of doctors who were kneeling quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Lehin Thai led the civil and military officials who had been waiting outside to welcome Divine Dr. Mo in. Ji Yunyao's eyes widened as she stared unblinkingly at Divine Dr. Mo walking to the bed to treat Ji Yunhuang. She did not even dare to breathe loudly. Lehin Thai also held his breath. This was their last hope. Divine Dr. Mo's eyebrows wrinkled even tighter. Lehin Thai and the rest also stared at his expression. Seeing his frown, their hearts also seemed to tighten. After a moment, Divine Dr. Mo finally let go of Ji Yunhuang's wrist and slowly stood up. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.